Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this roundtable. I'm very happy to welcome you all to this session, which is called Digital Public Infrastructure and Public Service Delivery, Inclusion, Efficiency, Security. The workshop is designed to bring together policymakers, researchers, implementing agencies, and development partners to take stock of what India's direct benefit transfer program has achieved, to interrogate the evidence with rigor, and to chart a credible path forwards. At its core, DBT is a reimagining of how the Indian state delivers welfare. Since its formal launch in 2013, the program has expanded to cover 325 schemes across 53 ministries, with cumulative transfers exceeding 46 lakh crores. In macro terms, DBT is a fiscal instrument for rationalizing public expenditure away from price-distorting, leakage-prone in-kind subsidies towards targeted, transparent cash transfers. Employing a cross-country review, a World Bank study recently showed that welfare gains from better targeting are real, but highly context-dependent, reflecting heterogeneity in information systems, administrative capacity, and implementation design. India's JAM trinity, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobile, represents a systematic effort to build these preconditions at scale. India's experience with DBT has emerged as one of the most prominent use cases globally. I can testify to this, having lived abroad, just 6 months ago. Whenever you go to international conferences on matters digital, India always comes up as a very prominent example of a successful country that has managed to use digital technology for the benefit of its citizens, and perhaps in conditions including the size and the diversity of population, where one might have thought that it's the most difficult use case, but in fact it is regarded as one of the most internationally successful use cases. The empirical record on DBT has been studied extensively in India and is encouraging in important respects. A large-scale RCT by Karthik Muralidharan and his co-authors found that biometric payment systems significantly reduced leakages and improved beneficiary welfare in the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Similar gains have been identified in the LPG subsidy reforms, where studies have shown that shifting to direct cash transfers has significantly reduced diversion and leakage by correcting perverse incentives. At the same time, there is a strand of evaluation research that has drawn attention to a more complex set of questions around inclusion and exclusion in beneficiary identification and last-mile delivery, including instances where authentication failures or connectivity constraints have prevented legitimate beneficiaries from accessing transfers. There are also concerns around the administrative efficiency of fund flows and monitoring systems, such as public finance management system, and the robustness of data governance and cybersecurity safeguards. The issues of grievance redressal and institutional accountability remain central to how these systems are experienced in practice by citizens. This roundtable seeks to unpack how these dimensions interact on the ground and to reflect on the institutional and design choices that will be critical in strengthening the effectiveness, resilience, and long-term sustainability of DPI-enabled welfare systems. The roundtable has been convened by ICRIER in partnership with the University of Queensland as part of a project titled A Paradigmatic Shift in Public Service Delivery, Inclusive, Efficient, and Secure DPI, funded by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, Australia. I take this opportunity to warmly welcome all distinguished speakers and discussants joining us today, including economists, public finance specialists, implementation experts, civil society representatives, and technology practitioners. The workshop is designed as a space for honest, evidence-bound exchange. We do not arrive with settled conclusions. The most productive conversations will be those that engage seriously with the tensions between efficiency and inclusion, between scale and precision, between administrative legibility and the lived experience of beneficiaries. We are particularly grateful for our keynote speakers today, to Shri Saurabh Tiwari, Additional Secretary at the Direct Benefit Transfer Mission, Government of India. And we're also immensely grateful to have with us Dr. Nageswaran, Chief Economic Advisor, Government of India. On behalf of ICRIER, I extend a very warm welcome to both our distinguished speakers and express our gratitude for agreeing to deliver the keynote and distinguished addresses for this workshop. Could I now please request Shri Saurabh Tiwari to deliver the keynote address? Shri Tiwari has had a distinguished career spanning over 3 decades in public admin across both the union and state governments. In his role as Additional Secretary, he has been closely involved in advancing the design, implementation, and monitoring of India's DBT architecture. So,
a very good morning to all of you, and I would specifically like to thank ICRIER, University of Queensland, Government of Australia for inviting me here and giving me an opportunity to deliver the keynote address. We have a very distinguished list of panelists, speakers who are present here, and I can see some on the video conference also. So I hope that I am able to deliver what is a very wide topic, as has been evident by the introduction given by Shekhar. I am reminded of a couplet to start with, which would give you a sense of what my difficulty is. Muktasar means very brief, and Tawil means very deep. So, तेरा नाम कितना है मुख्तसर, very brief, DBT or DPI, और तेरा जिक्र कितना तवील है. So very, very important. So this I'll try to justify in the 15 to 20 minutes I have. I could hear the bell ringing before it all started. Can I have yeah, I have the presentation. Thank you. So just a little brief of what DBT is like. So it initially started as a direct cash transfer, and initially it was more of a negative intervention. That is, the problem statement was that there were a lot of middlemen involved, there were large scale diversions, and this was put in basically as a mechanism to build dams so that we do not get all the benefits flowing in the river, going to the targeted fields and getting diverted midway. Benefits can be cash and in kind, and this is something which is still an issue. Even after 10 to 12 years of DBT, I still get references for asking exemptions कि हम cash to देते नहीं. So in kind is in fact a very important component, as we'll see. And the transfers are, there are two very key characteristics. One is, in the case of a cash scheme, the transfer should be electronic. In the case of an in-kind scheme, there should be an authentication, preferably biometric, at the time of the delivery. Some examples of cash transfers: we have student scholarship schemes, we have pensions, we have welfare delivery in the form of PM Kisan. We have a lot of schemes targeted at women coming up recently. And then we have in-kind transfers. And in fact, two of the biggest DBT schemes are in-kind. That is the food subsidy and the fertilizer subsidy. The basic differential here is in-kind is where the money does not go into the bank account. There is a good or service that is delivered, but the money does not go into the bank account of the beneficiary. So this is in short DBT journey. In India, we started very small in 2013. We have our friend Rajesh Bansal here who started it all, and we have conversations how it all started. And now we are into a very mature space with more than 320 central and centrally sponsored schemes and more than 2,500 state schemes. This is how much we have transferred. So it is around rupees 7 lakh crores. You would see the green graphs stabilizing. So That is the amount of money we transfer every year. And on a cumulative basis, we have transferred, sir, around 50 lakh crores of rupees since the inception of DBT. What we have achieved is accurate identification, because that was the key when we all started the DBT thing, and we'll see how we achieved it when we look in detail in Aadhaar. Financial and digital inclusion, ease of living for bona fide beneficiaries. This is very important because initially, as I said, it was like a negative intervention, and progressively we are moving towards a domain where we think more from the perspective of ease of living, because the other things have stabilized to a large extent. Uh, then curbing leakages, greater accountability and transparency. This is one very key element, because earlier it was, especially at the central level, that the whole workflow was like you give the money to a state government or to a NGO or to an implementing agency and forget. What DBT does is it instills a sense of accountability, that if so much of money is given, these are the terms and conditions. Have you identified? Have you authenticated? Are you transferring the money into the bank account of the beneficiaries? Are you ensuring that if it is an in-kind benefit, it is given only after duly authenticating the beneficiary? So this is another very important aspect, and all this is done through re-engineering, and it has led to efficiency and effectiveness in the delivery process. As has been pointed out by Shekhar, the jam trinity is the key driver of DBT. And in the initial days of DBT, all these elements were at a very initial phase. And today we have achieved saturation in all the three aspects. We have more than 180 crore bank accounts. The Aadhaar numbers are around 118 crores, and all the adults in the country, it is estimated, have Aadhaar. And overall saturation is around 95%. And the major gap is between 0 to 5 years and 5 to 18 years. This is what we want to challenge. And we have targeted that this is the gap we need to saturate. Similarly, mobile, India is one of the biggest mobile networks in the world. And as of now, we have around 1.17 billion mobile subscribers. And we have around 90 crores smartphones in the country. So we have achieved near saturation in this domain. Aadhaar is the basis, and in Hindi, Aadhaar means the foundation. So it is literally also, and in the real sense also, the foundation layer of DBT. And we have one of the biggest electronic identification systems in the world by way of Aadhaar. And it is using biometrics, it is using OTP, and it is using demographic forms of authentication. And there is an act governing the legal and regulatory aspects of Aadhaar. Benefits and Services Act, and it was promulgated in 2016. The purpose is to have a unique identification that is robust, which can eliminate duplicate and fake identities, and can be verified and authenticated in an easy, real-time, and cost-effective way. These are very important aspects, because earlier identification systems did not have such, especially the time and cost effective uh, uh, characteristics that Aadhaar has, did not exist prior to Aadhaar. And when I think of Aadhaar, I'm often reminded of the Greek scientist Archimedes, who said that if you give me a pole long enough and a place to stand, I can move the earth. So this is the power of Aadhaar. Uh, it has literally changed not only in the DBT space, beyond DBT also, it has been used to varied uses. And the challenge lies in how we can use Aadhaar in a better way, and basically unchain Aadhaar. To quote Rousseau, Man is born free, yet he is everywhere in chains. So the same perhaps applies to Aadhaar also. We need to unchain Aadhaar so that we can leverage it fully. And as of now, in the DBT ecosystem, it is used for identification, deduplication. It is used in the payments domain also as a financial address because it gives a double layer of credibility in the cash transfers. One is when you authenticate a person using Aadhaar, you know that X is X by way of perhaps a biometric authentication, which is the best way. But how do you ensure that all the X's in the country are excluded when you make payment to that X? So that is done when you use Aadhaar as a financial address. So the bank where you have the bank account, X has a bank account, would also biometrically authenticate that this Aadhaar number belongs to this particular X. So that is a very important dimension of use of Aadhaar in DBT. And finally, accessing fund. In a vast country like India, as Shekhar pointed out, it's not only the payment going to the bank account, the ease of accessing the bank account is also equally important. And here also Aadhaar acts as a authentication mechanism. There are banking correspondents, etc., who would go to the villages, far-flung areas of the country, carrying cash, and they authenticate the beneficiary for a cash out using Aadhaar. So that is one very important usage of Aadhaar. Financial inclusion we have all talked about, and India is doing very well on this part also. Around 89% of our adult population has a bank account, and it compares very well. These are World Bank numbers. So India compares very well with the rest of the world on this account also. Mobile is another very key aspect of our JAM Trinity. And there are two aspects of mobile. One is that it has also received quite a large saturation level. And the more important part is the affordability. If you see, and especially when we go out, we realize how cheap mobile and data is in India. Uh, and that, especially in a developing country, gives a large degree of inclusiveness also and credibility also when we use mobile, not only as a device uh, which is used for the purpose of communication, but also as a means of authentication, also as an interface with the government to citizen ecosystem. Uh, in fact, okay. So I think CSR has to leave a little early. So maybe I think you can give the address and this mobile portion over. Okay. So the mobile part, what is very relevant here is that it is very cheap and uh, it is saturated to a level where even the poorest, who are basically our target beneficiaries, they are able to use it. And not only does it act as a communication tool, it also acts for the purpose of giving an interface between the citizen and the government. And we have developed a lot of very small but very cutting edge tools in the mobile governance field, one of which is illustrated here, that is Umang. So all of us now face a very difficult situation because we have so many apps on our mobile, and it's very difficult to basically navigate them also. So we have this tool called Umang, where all the government apps are neatly cataloged, and you need just to download one Umang app, which is like the app of apps, neatly cataloged also. So it gives a very good ease of accessing the various interfaces. So with this, I'll end and I'll continue. Maybe around 10 minutes more I'll take, so you can, yeah.
Good morning, everyone, and Thank you, Shekhar, for having me here. I think the theme of digital public infrastructure and its relationship with inclusion, efficiency, and security in public service delivery is one that India has over the past decade moved from debating in seminar rooms to demonstrating at scale in the real world. That in itself is a significant transition, and it is worth reflecting on what has been built, what it has delivered, and where further effort is still warranted. I'll begin with a brief word on what we mean by digital public infrastructure. It is not simply about digitizing existing processes or moving paperwork online. It refers to a foundational, open, interoperable digital system built on public investment, but one that can be used and built upon by governments, private actors, and citizens alike. Think of it as the roads and railways of the digital economy, because once laid, they carry an enormous variety of traffic that their builders may never have specifically anticipated. In India's case, the core of this infrastructure rests on three pillars, as was pointed out both by Shekhar and by Saurabh Tiwari, which is known by the acronym JAM, Jandan, Aadhaar, and mobile connectivity, supported by payment systems, data sharing framework, and a growing ecosystem of digital public goods. To appreciate what DPA has accomplished, it is necessary to recall the situation it was designed to address, and some of which was already covered by Mr. Tiwari. I'll just briefly touch upon them. India's welfare architecture prior to the reforms of the last decade was characterized by considerable scale, but also by considerable leakage. Programs spanning food security, rural employment, housing assistance, pension support, fuel subsidies, and scholarship schemes were reaching hundreds of millions of citizens in nominal terms, but the share actually arriving at intended beneficiaries was substantially lower than what was budgeted and disbursed. Estimates suggested that roughly a third of total spending and the public distribution system alone did not reach the households it was meant to serve. Ghost beneficiaries, individuals enrolled in databases who did not exist or were deceased, and duplicate identities inflated roles across virtually every scheme. Inclusion errors let ineligible households benefit. Exclusion errors denied legitimate claimants. Weak monitoring, fragmented databases, and accountability gaps compounded these problems year after year. This was not merely an administrative inconvenience. At the level of national fiscal arithmetic, it did represent a significant misallocation of public resources. At the human level, it meant that those who needed the safety net the most were often those least reliably served by it. The gap between scheme design and scheme delivery had become a structural feature of India's welfare state. The response, therefore, was to build, in effect, an entirely new plumbing system for welfare delivery. Aadhaar, which, as pointed out, is the world's largest digital identity system with over 134 crore unique identifiers. For the first time, we have a reliable, deduplicated, biometrically verified identity for virtually every resident, and the Jandan program, which extended formal banking access to population that never had it, has now 58.2 crore accounts opened, again at a scale and speed that really had no precedent globally, and the Bank for International Settlement has documented it formally as well. Mobile penetration, accelerated by the domestic fall in data costs since 2016, connected this identity and the financial infrastructure to individuals in remote villages and urban peripheral alike. These three pillars were then linked to the payment architecture, the Aadhaar payment bridge, the public financial management system, and eventually the unified payment interface, which enabled government transfers to flow directly from the treasury to the verified bank accounts of the verified individuals in real time without passing through the long chain of intermediaries that had historically been the principal source of leakage. The direct benefit transfer system that emerged from this infrastructure now operates across more than 300 schemes, as he mentioned. The results are measurable and by any standard, substantial. Approximately 10 crore ghost beneficiaries have been eliminated from government roll, which is to say, resources previously being paid out to fictitious or ineligible claimants have been redirected or saved. Social protection coverage now extends to over 940 million citizens. The cumulative fiscal savings attributed to DBT are significant, reflecting the difference between what was spent previously on schemes with high leakage and what is spent now on direct verified transfers. Beyond the fiscal numbers, the multidimensional poverty data tells a story that's perhaps even more striking. According to Niti Aayog's estimates, 248 million Indians have escaped multi-dimensional poverty over the last decade. No single policy can claim sole credit for that, of course, and it would be an overstatement to attribute all of it to DPI. However, improvements in income, health outcomes, educational access, and infrastructure, all of them contributed. But the reliability of welfare delivery, the assurance that transfers will actually arrive in the right account on time without attrition, has been a meaningful part of the improvement in the floor of living standards for the most vulnerable. The IMF itself has framed the requirements of a well-functioning social safety net in terms of what it calls a trifecta: a robust identity system that allows accurate targeting, digital validation system that prevent ghost and duplicate entries, and third, a secure digital payment channel that minimize intermediaries. India has built all three and done so at a scale and speed that developed country peers too have not matched. This is not a boast. It is simply a factual observation. Countries in Western Europe with highly capable administrative systems still rely on fragmented databases, paper-based verification in many welfare domains, and payment systems that are considerably slower and less interoperable than what India has constructed through UPI and the Aadhaar payment bridge. The theme of this roundtable invites us to treat inclusion, efficiency, and security as distinct objectives, and they are analytically distinct indeed. But India's DPI experience suggests that designed well, they are mutually reinforcing rather than competing. Inclusion improved because people who are previously excluded from financial systems and therefore from the digital transfer ecosystem were brought in through Jan Dhan. Efficiency improved because the elimination of intermediaries reduced both cost and delay. Security improved because biometric verification made identity fraud substantially harder, and because the Aadhaar seeded account structure enabled real-time verification at the point of transfer. The phrase that has been used in policy circles, within quotes, inclusive efficiency, captures this very well. Every rupee saved through more precise targeting is a rupee that can be reinvested in expanded coverage or in other public goods without requiring additional borrowing or taxation. That is a fiscal logic that has real consequences for the sustainability of India's welfare program at their current scale. It is worth a brief comparison with the international experience, not to be self-congratulatory, but because honest assessment of where India stands is useful for calibrating what remains to be done. The World Bank and various international development institutions have noted that India's JAM DBT architecture represents one of the most sophisticated examples of digital welfare infrastructure anywhere in the world, and the speed of Aadhaar enrollment has no parallel. UPI's transaction volumes now exceed those of several major developed country payment systems combined. The GovTech Maturity Index and similar assessments have placed India in advancing tiers, reflecting both the infrastructure built and the degree to which it is actually used for public service delivery rather than sitting as latent capacity. Many middle-income countries have now studied India's model, and several, particularly in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America, are seeking to replicate elements of it with Indian technical and institutional support. The G20 period, during which India held the presidency, provided an important platform for sharing this experience within the peer learning framework among major economies. Beyond direct transfers, DPA has also begun to reshape other dimensions of public service delivery, through which, though with somewhat more uneven results. DigiLocker, with over 700 million registered users, has reduced the burden of document verification for citizens accessing services ranging from driving licenses to scholarship applications. The Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission is building a health identity layer that allows both health records to be portably accessed across providers. The eShram portal has extended registration and services to unorganized sector workers, and the CoWIN platform, which is now UWIN, has demonstrated during the COVID vaccination drive that digital infrastructure could be deployed at extraordinary pace and scale when the need arose. Over 2 billion doses administered and recorded with real-time tracking across a country of 1.4 billion people. Each of these represents a shift from service delivery that was episodic, document intensive, and geographically constrained towards delivery that is more continuous, lighter in its burden on citizens, and accessible from wherever the citizen may happen to be. Having acknowledged these achievements fairly, it's equally important to be clear about the areas where work is incomplete. Digital infrastructure, however sophisticated, is not the same as digital inclusion in the fullest sense. There remain significant populations among the elderly in particular, among those in areas with poor connectivity, among those with lower literacy and digital fluency, for whom the digital channel is still not reliably accessible. Building the infrastructure is necessary, but not sufficient. The last mile challenge of ensuring that those who most need services are also those who can most easily access them through digital means, that remains an ongoing effort. Data governance is a second frontier. As more and more domains of public service delivery come to rely on data sharing and digital records, the frameworks governing how the data is stored, who can access it, and under what conditions, and what recourse citizens have in the event of errors or misuse need to be commensurate with the systems themselves. Legislative and institutional frameworks in this area are evolving, but they need to keep pace with technical architecture. The third thing is interoperability across states remains a work in progress. The union government systems are increasingly well integrated, but the quality and completeness of state level digital infrastructure varies considerably. Since a significant portion of service delivery in health, education, land records, and local welfare schemes happens at the state level, the quality of citizen experience is often determined more by state capacity than by central infrastructure. Finally, cybersecurity. The security pillar in this roundtable's theme requires sustained institutional attention. Larger and more interconnected systems have larger attack surfaces, and the sophistication of threats evolves continuously. India has made investments in this area, but treating it as a completed task would be an error. To close, India has built over a relatively short period a digital public infrastructure that is genuinely world-class in its scale, design, and operational reach. It has demonstrably improved the inclusion, efficiency, and security of welfare delivery. The work ahead is not to replace this architecture by any means, but to deepen its reach, strengthen its governance, and extend its benefits to those who remain at the margins of the digital economy. This is a more tractable challenge than the one we faced a decade ago, and that in itself is a measure of how much has been accomplished. I once again thank ICRIER and DBT Mission for inviting me to share my thoughts. And also, it's very important to focus on what worked and how can it be built on, which is a welcome diversion from the geopolitical reality that is going on outside, which unfortunately beckons me very immediately back in the office. So I seek your forgiveness for not being present throughout the roundtable deliberations, and I'm sure I will be able to receive a sort of a document of the proceedings that happens today, and look forward to perusing it. And thank you very much, and wish you all fruitful and stimulating deliberation throughout the day. Thank you.
Anantha, we're very sorry to lose you to geopolitical considerations. But thank you. I thought that was a masterful presentation, so comprehensive, but so succinct. I thought in particular, your comments about whether inclusion, security, and efficiency are sort of complements rather than substitutes is well worth pondering over. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. Good day.
We can continue. Yes. Yeah. So we were at mobile governance, and coming back from geopolitical realities, my work has been made easier by the address of Chief Economic Advisor. So what I'll do from here on is to just address the points, what needs to be done further and what needs to be elaborated. So on the mobile governance front, what William Blake wrote maybe centuries back in his Auguries of Innocence has become something very real today. And I quote him, to see the world in a grain of sand. To see the world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. So this is how, thank you, and thank you to Blake. So this is what mobile has done in our lives, more particularly in the DBT front. If you see in the last few boxes on the slide, there was one very important issue raised by the chief economic advisor on what needs to be done on the last mile connectivity. So we not only have mobile as a means in the palm of the citizen, but we also have last mile connectivity mechanisms by way of common service centers, which are about 6 lakhs in the country, and they provide assisted service. CA had pointed out, for those who are the elderly, who are digitally or otherwise illiterate, how do we reach out to them? How do we include them? So for that, we have government supported public-private partnership mechanisms whereby they can avail the government services with ease. This has also been pointed out by the CA in his address. This is the actual amount of estimated benefits that we have saved by having the DBT mechanism. It is 4.31 lakh crores of rupees. And as had been pointed out, this money is being used elsewhere to ensure that we are able to saturate. There has been a lot of global acclaim for DBT, including from the World Bank, from the IMF, and one very interesting interaction I had was with Professor Paul Romer, ex-chief economist of the World Bank and a Nobel laureate in economics. And he said that it is something which is worth emulating in the domain of public policy and public service delivery. And more importantly, as is the theme of today's discussion, it has been built in the public space. It is a digital public infrastructure. So he pointed out that when I see around the world, while US might have its Googles and Metas and this is something which is built in the public domain and some public private partnership. So that is something which is unique about the DBT, Aadhaar, Jandhan, mobile, everything in the DBT domain. Where do we need to go? So we are evolving even in the DBT paradigm. The second generation DBT, we are thinking and we have put in place systems which are evolving, where it is not only the application which is through by way of an authentication and the end product that is by way of a cash transfer. The intermediate steps also, how we can re-engineer them. And one very important aspect is the eligibility documentation. So for any scheme, you need some eligibility criteria. Can we have those documents digitized? Can we publish it digitally? Can it be seeded with the digital identity that is Aadhaar? And can we pull it? So it would be a two-way help from an bona fide citizen perspective. You just punch in your Aadhaar, and there are working models for this which are already working. You just punch in your Aadhaar, you biometrically authenticate yourself. All the data that resides in the UIDI database, including your photograph, date of birth, name, etc., that is populated in the relevant fields. Now, if you are, say, applying for a scholarship, suppose it is a scholarship for a particular class, say, scheduled caste. So, if the need is that you need a scheduled caste certificate for that purpose, so that Aadhaar will go and hit that database procure that certificate, import that certificate. Now, as a citizen, if I am applying for the scholarship, I am happy because I don't have to upload and there are so many things, the file size is too large, etc., etc. And what is even more, from the government side, if suppose I have to verify that application as a government officer, it's very difficult to verify lakhs of applications, go to the issuing authority, both in terms of time, effort, money. If I get it from a reliable source, my work becomes very easy. So it fastens the whole process and the welfare delivery becomes much better. So that is what we are trying to do by way of DigiLocker also and API Setu. And the last part, which we see today as our destination, is move from an application-based process which we have today to a suo moto, reaching out to a citizen and with some minimal due diligence giving the benefit. So there is no need for application. We go to the citizen ourselves based on the database we have and deliver the benefits. Some states have already done a lot of work on this, and this is also something which is not just theory, it is already working. We need to scale it up at the national level, and those states which are lagging behind, which was pointed out by CA also in his address, how do we ensure that we do not need to reinvent the wheel and replicate these systems across the country? So that is the third part, and I see a lot of economists here also, those who are involved in budgeting also. So the way we formulate schemes today is based on estimates. When you have real data, that suppose at an income level beyond X, for say a particular gender, I have to give, this is my budget, how much can I give? So you have policy making which becomes very simple, budgeting which becomes very simple, and the whole governance model becomes better. So that is all I had. Just one or two things before I conclude. Some of the points that were raised by the chief economic advisor. Uh, COVIN was one, and UPI. So UPI is a digital public infrastructure in India where our digital payments have grown to an extent that we account for around 45% of the total global digital transactions. COVIN, another thing was pointed out when my daughter was studying in US at that time, and she had a signed paper COVIN, sorry, vaccination certificate. Here we had digital certificates, and what was even more important, it was accessible through very easy means like, say, WhatsApp. Suppose you are at the airport at that time and you have forgotten your certificate, you just put on the WhatsApp and you'd get that certificate. So this is the type of achievements we had. Even the payments were being signed in some of the countries through paper checks. With one click of the button in India, we could achieve so much that in 3 tranches, all the female Jan Dhan account holders, the money was transferred in their accounts. State capacity and security are the last two aspects, and I would agree with the chief economic advisor that the theme of today's conference, inclusion, efficiency, and security, all three are built in into the DBT and DPI ecosystems. And again, inclusion and efficiency and security, they perhaps are not uh, antithetical. They are in many ways complementary to each other. So with this, I would like to conclude and thank you all for giving me a patient hearing. And I look forward to very meaningful deliberations during the roundtable. And if we could get some recommendations, we would be very happy to learn from whatever else we can do to not only improve our systems, but also to basically help others, especially in the South-South cooperation domain, to reap the dividends of the digital public infrastructure that we have created and which we are trying to improve. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Tiwari. I thought that was an amazing presentation. I particularly found it very rich in terms of the data and the numbers that you've put and the landscape that you've covered in terms of, the vast scope of this particular use of DPI. As we go to the roundtable, I just wanted to make a few comments based on what we heard. And I speak particularly as an economist. I'm aware that not everyone around the table is from the same profession as me. But one thing I found, at least in the literature, and I'm not an expert in this area, is one of the benefits of substituting cash transfers, for in-kind benefits, is what economists would think of as consumer choice. If you're a low-income consumer and you want to substitute some of the cereals in your diet with meat, the cash transfer enables you to do that, which is a welfare improvement on simply having lots and lots of rice or whatever it is that is coming from the direct benefit transfer. I haven't seen many studies trying to put numbers, but that is presumably a big welfare gain, which sometimes is lost in the debate. The second point, which perhaps I'll put it out anyway. Mr. Tiwari, you described in particular how many administrative efficiencies arise from this. So it's not just a question of the beneficiaries' lives being made easier, but also the bureaucrats who are administering these problems now are much more efficient. So I think some studies on the gains from that and, to what extent the bureaucracy is then freed up for equally urgent tasks that they didn't have time to do before. That would be another aspect of the welfare analysis, which I haven't seen too much of, but which is undoubtedly important quantitatively. And then the third comment is, this is something Payal and I were talking about in the morning. The studies that are out there, at least the good academic RCTs, are very heavy on identifying the benefits. Karthik's paper, some World Bank. We also heard about some problems about last mile connectivity, inclusion, elderly people, people who are not able to go to the office where they need to go in order to set this up. I haven't seen too much literature on that, and that would be a useful corrective to a literature that is benefit heavy. So anyway, with those remarks, I'd like to thank, Anantha as well as Mr. Tiwari. Thank you so much. That was a brilliant way to kick off this roundtable. Yes. Any questions?
I have a small question and suggestion. So you have benefit transfers in the form of cash. By the way, I'm Sunil Kulkarni from BCFI, Business Correspondent Federation of India. The other one is in the form of kind. And as Mr. Aiyar mentioned that, the choice to customer is paramount. So you are here force fitting that, he needs to go to these outlets and get rice or whatever it is. I mean, food was one of them, fertilizer is another. CBDC is launched. So CBDC currently is almost now 20 months into trials. And CBDC has hybrid of both cash and kind so that, you can lock currency to a particular merchant category code. So because you are able to lock merchant category code, you could potentially just give the same benefit in the form of cash, but that cash is now locked to a merchant category code. So is government thinking on making benefit payments through CBDC?
Thank you for the brilliant question. And as Shekhar had also pointed out, do we need flexibility at the hand of the beneficiary, or do we have rigidity that the cash that is coming in has to be used for a particular purpose? This is a question which is being debated, and my answer to it would be that it would depend upon the circumstances also, as also the legal and regulatory framework. The question that you had raised, Shekhar, was with regard to food. Now, we have a legal obligation as a state by way of an act of the parliament where food security is to be ensured for around 80 crore out of the 140 crore population that we have. So the first instance, like in food, the first obligation we have to fulfill by way of adhering to that act. But as you very correctly pointed out, CBDC is programmable. Now, if today I am getting a food subsidy in kind by way of getting rice or wheat or whatever, maybe I'm not very happy with the quality, maybe as was pointed out, instead of rice or wheat, I would like to have something else. So we have already piloted a CBDC DBT in the food domain in one state and two UTs, where the CBDC is programmed and the the merchant outlets are fixed. The items that you can buy using that CBDC are fixed, and therefore you get that flexibility also, but the government also ensures that the food subsidy that you are getting is consumed for food also. It is not spent on, say, liquor. So it is not used for that purpose or a purpose which are totally extraneous to it. For instance, if you have a scholarship, so a scholarship should preferably be used for reimbursement of tuition fee or for buying books or for buying uniforms, but maybe not some other activities. So we are doing a pilot on that. But then for every scheme, we have to ask this question upfront, whether we need to manage on the part of the beneficiary where the money is to be spent or whether we should leave it free. There is another argument also. For instance, I get a food subsidy by way of CBDC. Today I am ill. I don't need rice, wheat, whatever. I need to go to the doctor. So leave it to me where I want to use it rather than lock it and program it where the state feels like. So it's a question that we need to answer, and the answer would not be the same in every case. Maybe we could have a negative list. For instance, has been pointed out, maybe alcohol is a no-no. You can't buy cigarettes using CBDC, things like that. Thank you.
Now it's on, yeah. So I just like to interject, not interject, to point to what you said and what Saurabh said. One is a fundamental thing which Shekhar said about choice. We tried a pilot in Puducherry and Delhi on, instead of food, giving cash. Exercising consumer choice is a complex machinery of the government and true choice. So that needs to be taken into account. Secondly, there are not just, as he mentioned about food, there are 7-8 pilots on CBDC. Just visualize the journey of a consumer in a CBDC. Can we make it easy? That is the question, because a lot of people have been speaking to me about it. I said, great, programmability. Although programmability has existed in food coupons in US for like 50 years. The Visa cards and merchant codes, all that. So we need to be a bit aware of all this before we go full hog. And he made the point. He wanted to do that. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, so you had questions from the AS?
Yeah.
Please go ahead, yeah. Because then
Sorry,
we need to
one-
start the...
Right. I'll have reserved more of my remarks for the later section, but one quick question to Mr. Tiwari and maybe a suggestion also is the two things. One is the CAG report also underscores one important factor, that the factors leading to authentication errors in Aadhaar updates, they are not visible to the public. So I think a detailed study on why that happens would be a very useful thing for people on the ground. The second thing I want to say is the methodology of arriving at estimated savings. Now, that seems to be a little bit of a black box for people and academics. Many of us I have also personally filed RTIs to arrive at the methodology of savings. And what I find is the RTIs do not give very detailed methods. So I think one suggestion would be to conduct a workshop wherein we call in people from the government, people from the civil society, academics, etc., and collectively arrive at methodologies to arrive at savings, because I think otherwise there'll be a dissonance of what constitutes a savings.
Thank you. Aadhaar authentication, the initial biometric failures we were talking about were on an ecosystem which was premised primarily on fingerprints. And the clientele, the beneficiaries that we were targeting had poor fingerprint quality because of the manual labor, etc., that they did. Now, recently, UIDAI has come up with a very good solution for this by way of face authentication. So, face authentication, the number one, the quality of the fingerprint is not involved. Number two, the device ecosystem is also much more mature, because there was an add-on which was required in the earlier system where you had to plug in a fingerprint reader in whatever device you were using. Now it is possible through a mobile phone, both Android as well as iOS, and you can do the face authentication on that. And the failure rate is much lesser, and it has been picking up very fast. We have a friend from UIDI who maybe during the course of the roundtable would elaborate more on that. So that part has been addressed to a large extent. On the methodology of savings, that is an estimate, and I would assure you that we do a lot of due diligence in order to arrive at it. But whether it needs a public consultation, you have set me thinking. Maybe I can't answer it as of now.
Yes, that happens. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you very much. We have started the workshop on a very interactive mode, and that's what is expected at the end of this workshop. We do have a long session, and you are free to walk out for stretching your legs, because we go on without a break till 1:35. And so I would just like to thank everyone who's here. I had some written comments, but in the interest of time, I leave it here. The idea is, because we are also doing our research, and ICRIER, when we were having many sets of questions, which are not available through any secondary research, any publication. One of the most important questions was, how do we arrive at these fiscal savings? We just went to DBT for Bharat and just looked at those savings scheme-wise, etc. But then what goes behind to calculate those savings? Fiscal savings are there. That's something which is not contested, but how much exactly, and that'd be good. So before just to introduce our moderator today, and I'm very thankful and fortunate to have my friend also from school, who happens to be in this area of research for many more years than we have been at ICRIER. So this is Dr. Sumita Kale, CEO and Senior Fellow at Indicus Foundation. She is a financial and macroeconomist. Her work on financial inclusion and welfare systems brings both analytical depth and practical insight to these conversations. Our work at ICRIER, we owe a lot also to Gates Foundation, because we started doing a lot of work on digital public infrastructures. And of course, now many more micro questions are coming up, which we would take on in the future. But this workshop will help us answer the questions which we are facing currently on the interface or intersection. They are not mutually exclusive, but inclusion, efficiency, and security in India's direct benefit transfer. So I'm sure today's discussions contribute meaningfully. Over to you, Sumita.
Thanks so much, Payal. Okay, I'm really looking forward to today's roundtable. Even when I saw the responses coming in for the, everybody has been, we've been fortunate that we've had such excellent response from so many different dimensions, and we're trying to cover all perspectives. It's a very comprehensive topic, like Sir just mentioned. So I'm going to talk as little as possible. But before we begin the discussion, we would have two special addresses still. One is from Mr. Rajesh Bansal, who just demitted office as being CEO of the Reserve Bank Innovation Hub. Before that, he was with the RBI and on deputation to UIDAI. So he's actually seen Aadhaar in cradle. And I am fortunate to know him since those days. So really looking forward to his introductory comments today. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Anantha. Thanks, everyone, ICRIER, Shekhar, Payal, for inviting me. When I was listening to Saurabh starting his address, I felt I am too old or what. It's like a grandfather listening to the stories of a child. But it's always good to know that the child has gone places and obviously all of you are nurturing it. So it was because some of my co-conspirators are in this round table, Shweta, and Sumita and Sunil. So a lot of co-conspirators across the table, they know what went into making it where it is. I'll just make a few points because I know we are running short of time. One angle of Aadhaar, which is not talked about, I still focus on DBT angle, is a story from Jharkhand. There's this India Today journalist who went to Jharkhand to do a story on AEPS and APB. Shweta Punch, she is now with Money Control. And I can't forget I had a rule. I will not go to the field. Let the journalist go to the field and give us honest feedback. So she went to the field and came back. Rajesh, do you know something? I'm like, what happened? There is an angle which you never thought of. Women in that district never got their job guarantee wages themselves. It was always paid to the husbands. I'm like, yeah, I know. So what? She said, this is the first time they were related that the women have an agency over their money and they will receive the money into their account. So this angle of DBT into women's account, giving them agency over the money is a huge thing, which I know Gates has done some study, but I remember the Madhya Pradesh one, but it was a different angle. Rohini had done something. It's something which we should study, how it has impacted women's life. Apart from the fact that in India, a patriarchal society that we are, women are no more the wife of or daughter of, they have an independent identity thanks to Aadhaar. So just some suggestions and couple of other comments. Exclusion errors is something from day one when we started, we worked very hard to try and ensure that exclusion errors are minimal. What I have been reading and talking to people, over the years, exclusion errors seem to have gone up because that's the fate of a population scale solution. I'm looking at Shweta because she and I had hundreds of hours of debates. Rajesh, you're not focusing on exclusion. My take to her was 100 crore people. I mean, if it's 2% excluded, it's 20 million, agreed. But we have to look at, can we get 95% the money that they have? But over time, systems have become insensitive, is what I have realized. The governments have become insensitive. Saurabh, don't mind my saying. It doesn't mean the central government, it means the last mile delivery is not solved. One important part of that, it's an interesting thing what we have done in India. We talk about it, I talk about it globally, is the entire DBT is the way we are designing and improved. One critical element of that, somehow nobody wants to talk about. And I'll be honest, I don't wear a public hat, I can talk about it. The pie of DBT. I'm sure Shweta, the pie, 3.14. There is a committee set up led by Nandan with 10 secretaries. And Sumita knows that. The story was that we should pay 3.14% commission to the banks to deliver DBT effortlessly. Because the estimated cost those days was about 3,000 crores. So estimate was to deliver 3 lakh crores, we need to spend 3,000 crores. I can go on and on. You will get bored 24 hours on at least 20 meetings which are attended with multiple secretaries' expenditure. Every time it was a new story. And DFS. So unfortunately, that problem is not solved. Today, there is a lot of talk about BC is defrauding, BC is doing X, BC is doing Y. Why? Because they don't get a decent paycheck. But somehow, the government has taken the view, I remember of those days, the banks are owned by me, they are all state-owned banks. Maybe to make it slightly interesting, bear with me, I'll not take too much time. When I was arguing for this full time, I was a face where everybody hated me. I went to a DFS joint secretary. I'll not even name the year, you might get it. And he's like, Rajesh, you guys continuously last evening also meeting the expenditure secretary. In 3.14, you guys are obsessed. I'm like, talk to a bank, they will tell you they need money. And he picks the phone and calls the PNB chairman. And and he was on the board of PNB. He puts it on speaker. I'll not name the chairman also. How are you? I said, tell me, do you need money? Sir, bank hi aapka hai. Bank is yours, we are yours, whatever you say is fine. Now that, so to say, does not work for people at scale. So the pie of DBT, and sort of happy to tell you the history, it helps sometimes, if you know where it's come from. So expenditure, that somehow has not happened. Then we still haven't designed truly end-to-end digital journeys, and it's good to know that he's talking about end-to-end digital journeys using DigiLocker and others, and it's high time. I was happy. The last point I wanted to make was DPT 2.0. I'm happy Saurabh is talking about 2.0 and 3.0. So happy to help you think through it. Social registry you already added. In DBT, one of the things that has not happened is the whole of government has not happened. It is still segregated. Views of different ministries, different state governments. So I think the time has come that instead of resting on our laurels, globally, Pranay is there from Gates. Yeah, we talk about it. But I kind of know the soft underbelly of, so to say, the child produced. I know that there are challenges and we need to work on it rather than just, we have done a lot. Obviously, we should be proud of it. The other two things, when I joined as the CEO of Reserve Bank Innovation Hub after 5 years of international consulting post-Aadhaar and DBT, I was shocked when I learned that farmers in India, dairy farmers in India, go through the same pain as they were before Aadhaar. Same eKYC challenge, same e-sign problem. They were unlucky. The first bank which piloted it was unlucky that they came across the guy who started it all. The technology provider is telling the MD it takes 15 minutes to do eKYC. And I was in the field. I said, have you done some homework on me? He's like, what's the big deal? It may take 10 minutes. I said, it takes 10 seconds. So I had to really fight it out with the banks to start eKYC. But still, you tell me, any of you opened accounts? I don't think more than 20-25% of banks use eKYC. For KYC, eKYC, that is a challenge. And not just banks. Across the government, across multiple this thing. The one entity which used it at scale, I am proud of it, is Jio, 100 million subscribers in 100 days. So I would call it that was my last achievement, that eKYC or telecom before I left. And the last thing from a global point of view, I see a lot of people who work globally sitting here. This, I have met too many people who are starry-eyed. Aadhaar has done this, India has done this. But what I see across countries, I'm happy to name countries, but I don't want to do that. They built DPI. Which DPI? For what? They start with ID. But for whom? To solve what pain point? I visited Philippines recently. Unfortunately, they've done nothing. I was advising them when they started their ID. What are they using it for? Nothing. Multiple other countries like that, Rwanda. Luckily, I was talking to the governor, I'm very friendly with her. We did what we call as a ULI equivalent, credit market infrastructure, to leverage the ID that they have. So I'll stop here. So I'm saying just reflect a bit. I have all the time in the world to reflect, and this really helped me. Thank you so much, Payal, for inviting.
Thank you so much, Rajesh, for saying it very succinctly, that we've gone a very, very long way, but we shouldn't be blind to the fact that there is lots more to do, especially at the last mile. And that's what each of us in this room actually is there to address. So we'll pick up all the points honestly, without taking it personally as a, as a bad mark, but as something that needs to be fixed. I'd like to invite Dr. Rajeev Shorey, who's Director of Indian Institute of Information Technology in Surat, and also Adjunct Professor of Computer Science and Engineering Department in IIT Delhi and IIT Gandhinagar, to give his introductory remarks. Thank you, sir.
Well, good morning, everyone. And I'd like to, at the outset, extend my sincere thanks to ICRIER. Thanks, Shekhar, and also University of Queensland. So prior to this assignment that was given to me by the Government of India, Ministry of Education, I was in IIT Delhi heading the CEO of University of Queensland, IIT Delhi Academy of Research. My good friend Priyanka Singh is here. Priyanka, how are you? She's in Queensland right now, Brisbane. So I spent 3 years as CEO there, and then
yeah, hi Rajeev. I'm good.
yeah, great
Nice
to see
to
you,
see you.
Priyanka. Yeah, we'll see
Yeah.
you soon. Thanks so much. So thanks again. Let me kind of have a different tone here, because I'm coming from technology and engineering, and of course, great discussion. I was making my notes religiously when all of you were talking, because that's how it is. Technology folks have to figure out the gaps from the non-technology folks. So what I'll do today is I'll focus in the next 5-10 minutes. I'm conscious of the time, maybe 10 minutes maximum, 7-8 minutes, on strengthening resilience and security by design in large-scale DPI architecture. So I'll share with you my thoughts here, and something that we were doing earlier in IBM. I've had the great pleasure of working for IBM Research, General Motors Research, and recently TCS Research under the CTO, Anantha. So I'll share with you what has happened that can help us in a very, very high-scale system that we are talking about today, DPI. So let me start very quickly, and I'm not going to go through all this, what I have here, but these are just the points I thought I had in mind, which I captured. The resilience, the architectural resilience. I think it's, as engineers and as techno folks, we've seen a lot of this happening in the automotive sectors. I've had a great pleasure of working in General Motors Research in Detroit and in Bangalore. And I remember when we all, my team in Bangalore and Detroit, when we looked at automotive sector, they said, Rajeev, you're going to head the global cybersecurity efforts in the automotive industry. It's a very hard challenge, because remember, when you're driving a car, when you're in the car, these are not real-time systems. There are life-critical systems. You make one mistake in the software, one line, one variable, you are done. There's a crash there. And for those who may not know, that the number of lines of code in an ECU, electronic control unit, in a car, in the CAN bus, is about hundreds of millions of lines of code written by engineers, and many of them are my students or colleagues. So it just tells you that in addition to cyber, so there is a new word that was coined, and I'd like to point that out to my esteemed colleagues. The word that was coined a decade ago was trustworthiness. So they said, let's not just be happy only with securing cyber security, which was very nicely mentioned by Saurabh ji and of course Anand ji earlier and other colleagues. Trustworthiness includes security and privacy and resilience and safety. So safety was a critical metric. These are actually metrics that are quantifiable. You can't, they don't, English definition is there, but they're quantifiable. So when you say today that DPI is secure, I'll be very concerned about privacy. Privacy is absolutely critical. Of course, what the government of India has done is commendable. We are all, I think this is, as was pointed earlier, the largest scale in the world, and works very well. But the challenges really are security and privacy and reliability and resilience. There's definition of each of these. So they call these metrics together as trustworthiness. And I think that's a very hard problem, because as mentioned by Nageswaran ji, that it is not just a few attack vectors or attack surfaces. There are plethora of attack vectors. There's databases, there are APIs, there's firmware, right? And all these, they bring up attack vectors and attack surfaces that has to be addressed. And then there's privacy, and then there's all these other metrics. So coming to the architectural resilience, we are clear that the architecture has to be decentralized and federated. We need to plan for failover and graceful degradation. And of course, we've all talked about modular microservice, right? So that is at a very high level. When I talk about security by design principles, the first thing that comes to our mind, even what we do in cybersecurity in our labs, is zero trust architecture. Don't trust anybody. Don't trust any platform. Now, you know what's happened in India. I should probably not mention this, but I guess all of you know this. Huawei as a company, I can mention this now, don't have to quote it. There was a serious challenge because you never know what hardware was coming in from the neighbor in northern part. You never know what was happening there. There were all these, agents over there. So you never, so they said, listen, thank you so much. Pleasure having you in India, but we're not interested. A lot of things are going to be made in India and work with partnering countries. So the zero trust architecture really says that don't trust anyone. No platform is to be trusted. Verify with very strong authentication and continuous authorization. Whether it's access points or Wi-Fi, whether it's your telecom, I mean, Jio is doing that, as you rightly said. They're very stringent security measures. So it's really a continuous authorization, authentication that lead to the zero trust architecture. Even the chips that we buy, now the government of India is very stringent. True, if you are funded by the government of India, CFTIs like IITs, IIITs, well, make sure that they are from the vendor that are authenticated, authorized by the government of India. We can't just go and procure a system just because we think, oh, it's great performance, great company. No. Is it now authorized, okayed by the government of India? So I think that's a great thing. I kind of agree with that. Strong identity and access controls that is already having data protection, as was pointed out earlier. Privacy, therefore, becomes a very important, area. Secure APIs. All of us know that the apps that we are coming out with, you mentioned wonderful apps, including the app, Umang app, right? I've not used it, but it's a great app. That you have to really secure these apps. And it's not an easy thing to secure the apps because there are a lot of potential vulnerabilities. I'm not saying they are, but there are potential vulnerabilities there. So one has to always ensure that get those ethical hackers and say, I'm going to pay you, but convince me that there are no gaps whatsoever in the system, which is very complex. So you have simple techniques in technology like rate limiting, don't allow beyond a point. We know this in all our servers, anybody can. So people who have, when you go to servers, you can't, there is a very well-known attack called denial of service attack or the DOS attack, where people keep bombarding TCP, they keep bombarding the server to choke it. So the simple answer is, well, do rate limiting. Don't allow beyond a point. Don't allow the number beyond a point. You can do continuous authentication. You can validate for every input and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you need network and infrastructure security at every level. One thing we learned in General Motors was segmentation. The architecture of DPI is a very complex architecture. I think Saurabh knows it better than all of us. It's a very complex, it's a distributed architecture. And in these architectures, it's very important to do segmentation, which means you cannot secure the whole system. There is no one that serves all. So you have to go piecewise. You have to look at system A, system B, system D, secure A, then B, then C, and then connect the dots together. So you have to have team, and each of them is different. Database is very different from APIs, which is very different from app, which is very different from servers. But as we know that all these technologies are involved in a very complex architecture like DPI, enabling direct benefit transfers. So I think that's another lesson learned. And of course, continuous monitoring and intelligence. But I want to come to something very important now in the few minutes that I have, that the world is now moved to AI-driven anomaly detection, right? So what a lot of us are doing now is leveraging AI, machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI, which is the large language models. By the way, that's a scary word. I'll just talk about it for a minute. So we are trying our best to leverage AI, ML in everything we do. And I believe that's already happening in the world of digital public infrastructure. Whether it's anomaly, now it's well known that anomaly and fraud detection they can be solved if you apply AI ML, whether it's intrusion detection and then intrusion prevention. We know that AI-driven cybersecurity is a very critical area now. Almost all the universities, IITs, IIITs, ISC, Bangalore, multinationals, including our Tata research, TCS research, where I was, are working on it very heavily. But the challenge here is that what if the AI/ML system themselves have vulnerabilities? So it's a very complex world we are living in. We have to make sure that the AI/ML systems, whether there are models, these are the machine learning models, or the servers, or any infrastructure that we were talking about earlier in the morning, are themselves secure. So the security of AI/ML itself is a very big area now, which is attracting massive funding, right? In fact, in everything that is happening in the country in DPI, and with experts like Saurabh and all of you in this room, all of you in this room, it is clear that the marriage with technology is never stronger than it's now. Completely, you cannot do without technology, particularly the AI/ML, whether it's intelligent traffic management, predictive reliability, or policy intelligence, or NLP, language interfaces. The list goes on and on. I'll give you one example in the just few minutes that I have. So there are a lot of new paradigms, and I don't want you to know this, but you must, for the benefit of all here, it's only fair that I mention that there are a lot of new paradigms in AI/ML that are addressing these issues. Let's take an example of privacy. So we've done a lot of work, thanks to my wonderful, the brilliant students of IIT Delhi, and now IIIT Surat, that we worked on a new paradigm called federated learning. So federated learning is a whole new paradigm which looks at and how it does that is, I don't send the data to anyone. So all of us cannot even send a bit of data to anybody else. That is violating privacy. Instead, we send the machine learning models to others. So let's say I'm a server and all my colleagues in the room are clients, or call them edge nodes. I'll send the model. The model will be trained by your data, and then it'll come back to me, the trained model, and I will take an aggregate from all in the room. I will never share the data with anyone, but I will share the model, which is fine. So the federated learning paradigm is a paradigm which wonderfully addresses privacy. Then there are other paradigms like reinforcement learning, graph neural networks.
So
deep
this
neural
will be
networks
online,
are
online and
coming
all
to
day, right?
big rescue in large systems with high scale systems like DPI. And finally, now we're in the world of large language models. I don't know how many of you have used Claude and Grok, but I use Claude around the clock. I'm telling you, it's a game changer now. People think, "Arey, Rajeev, will machine learning, will this, you think that there's a saturation?" I said, look, we have now opened up Pandora's box. There is absolutely no going back. Should we be worried? No, we should just leverage them as much as possible, but we should not let's not, let's ensure that our kids, the new generation, are completely, they stop using their brains, because what I'm seeing is now you don't write letters, letters are generated by ChatGPT. You stop thinking now. So that's the sad part. And the last part I can tell you is that I was talking to my colleague in IIT Delhi, a very eminent Professor Mawsam, and he said today ChatGPT LMs can solve IIT JEE questions. The hardest exam in the world is a joint entrance examination. But they can't solve all but 25%. Now that's scary, which really means that these models are something that will heavily be used in DPI in the future, because we don't know how this will evolve, right? It's going to be completely distributed. And I have this colleague we're just starting a center of excellence in Surat. We're delighted to invite many of you, all of you, end of the month. CP Gurnani ji is my chairman of the board. CP Gurnani ji, very well known. So he's going to inaugurate a center of excellence. And one of my colleagues coined a lovely quotation. I'm going to read out here, and that's my last slide. AI will not replace industries, but industries that understand AI will replace those that do not. So if you don't leverage AI, ML, deep learning in anything what you do, including the very deep area called DPI, there's not much that we can do. And my final comments are that today we are living in the AI, ML driven intelligence, and let's leverage that in whatever we do. And I'm sure that's happening. I'm just saying that let's kind of see how best we can leverage it. Gen AI will continue to play a very big role. There are challenges there. There's so many models. There's so many Gen AI, LLM. Which one do you leverage? Which one do you not? Well, I guess leverage all. There are brilliant students that we have in the country, and that's very, very proud of. And finally, I think cybersecurity, that's one area that is never going to be. If you work in cybersecurity, you'll always have a job in your life, right? Always. Whatever the time frame is. And the same is true with AI ML. So I think the marriage of the policy makers, and many of you are thought leaders, whether it's Rajesh ji or whether it's Sunil ji, all of you, Pranit ji, I think the marriage of what we do in policy and in systems like this and technology is absolutely critical. The both worlds need to work very closely together. And as folks starting a center of excellence in AI, ML and IIIT Surat, I'll be very happy to help you all in any way I can. Thanks so much.
Rajeev, thank you very much. Can I just, you gave an excellent presentation on cybersecurity, but didn't mention the elephant in the room, which is Mythos. Do you have any thoughts on that? So the news reports indicate that Mythos has been made available to various big corporations in the US to fix their security flaws, and also perhaps to some allied governments like the UK. But what about a country like India, which has rolled out this massive DPI? Are we not vulnerable to Mythos or something like that in the hands of a hostile actor, which can then find flaws in this massive system that we've got? And how do we counteract that?
Now, that's a great question, Shekhar. So there are two, let me answer it very quickly in two parts. One is that we have wonderful company like Sarvam AI in Madras, Chennai. So IIT Madras works closely with them. Sarvam AI is really a big story. I think what the message from the government, at least from the ministry, MIT that I work closely with, Ministry of Electronics and IT and Ministry of Education, and all ministries, is that, look, do not take anything for granted until you're not convinced. If you're implementing it in your products, like what you mentioned, DPI and other related products, do not do that without thorough authentication and authorization. Absolutely. So they now have actually layers and layers of team that are doing that. We can leverage. I mean, Anthropic has, Claude is Anthropic, right? As you know, that's another example. Then I was working with the Indian Air Force. In fact, the former Vice Chief who fought Operation Sindoor, the main guy under the Prime Minister, Air Marshal Narmadeshwar Tiwari, who's on news every day. This is 1 year of Sindoor, Operation Sindoor. He said that we are very careful. There was a thought earlier to just take Anthropic and equivalent and just use it in the Indian Armed Forces. And they said, no, absolutely no. Let's not do that. Let's have our own systems. Sarvam in helping that. So yeah, good point. For sectors which are not critical, for example, defense or the government departments, you can leverage any of these models. But that sectors are very critical. Very stringent checks and security checks there. So you have to go through layers and layers of authentication, authorization, and approval.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, the world is changing faster than before we blink, and we still have so many problems which have still not been solved from a decade ago, which we are going to start coming to. So we'll have to, of course, we finished the first part of our session event today. So the second part, which is the open roundtable, we'll begin with opening remarks from everyone. I'll be asking some kind of focused question to everybody, and we'd be really grateful if you could keep your remarks within 5 minutes. There'll be a bell ringing at 4, and then 5 it'll stop. But we just want to make sure that everybody gets their voice heard in the room. Following which we will have an open discussion where different points will be taken up in greater, more elaborately. So I'd just like to begin with Arijit Chakrabarti, who's a senior manager onboarding for the authentication and verification division UIDAI. That's essentially where it all starts. If you could just tell us something about, because a lot of background information has already come through with the special addresses so far. What are the new initiatives which are there in the from your division, and actually where do you see design-induced frictions today, currently in the system? Thanks.
Okay, so good morning to all the distinguished luminaries in this room, Additional Secretary, sir. So with the permissible time, just to give you an overview, which has been already explained in DPI of the role of Aadhaar. So when it comes to authentication, in Aadhaar, it means online means of ID verification, because many people confuse with, giving paper as an ID proof, which we term as offline verification. But for us, authentication means online verification. It can be through a web portal and now in mobile APIs. Since the inception of Aadhaar Act in 2016, authentication regulations came into force in 2019. And when it comes to authentication processes, we have the verifying agency, which is officially termed as requesting entities, and it's a two-tiered model. One we say as AUA, KUA, which have the required infrastructure for providing authentication facilities and at the same time storage of data, because there are repetitive beneficiaries whose identity needs to be authenticated time and again. And the data storage guidelines are in adherence to Aadhaar data privacy security as well as sharing of information regulations. So over the time since the first Aadhaar card rolled out way back in 2010, yes-no authentication came into force, which only gave a response that yes, if an Aadhaar number holder is providing his or her number, whether it's valid or not. Then UIDAI went a step ahead in giving eKYC authentication, where not only yes or no response, but demographic details such as the name, the gender, age, physical address, and of course the photograph. And till date, around 180 billion transactions have occurred, to which UIDAI can proudly tell that over 60% is contributed by DBT transactions. And these numbers do seem humongous, but still, it's a long way to go, because we have just, touched the tip of the iceberg. Like sir in his opening remarks told about the deepness with the brief terminology of DBT. There are very, use cases to be explored. Now, when it comes to authentication processes, a simple process flow initiates with the Aadhaar number holder giving his or her number. The requesting entity accepts it, provided the consent. One thing which is very important to all of you is always consent is taken, because it's a voluntary process. It's not a forceful or a mandatory. Now, once that consent is taken, the requesting entity, be it a AUA or a sub-AUA, sub-KUA under it. Sub-KUA, sub-KUA are more like tenants who are using the infra of the principal AUA, KUA. And the data is transferred through secured lease line through an ecosystem partner of UIDAI, which we call as Authentication Service Agency. So no LAN, WAN or external network is involved. It hits UIDAI's master servers and the response comes back. And this entire process takes time not more than 30 milliseconds. Now, I heard from yourself that some authentication errors were there. Yeah, I will conclude. So authentication errors in terms of new initiatives are being worked upon. UIDAI has launched Health API, where monitoring of performance of APIs, both in mobile apps or web portals, is being monitored. Another major thing when it comes to transparency of data, UIDAI has facilitated update of beneficiaries who have either been deceased, whose Aadhaar numbers have been deactivated or reactivated after omission. That updates to requesting entity has always been enabled. So this has also helped in identification of effective beneficiaries in this scenario. And coming to last point, when it comes to economics, requesting entities have now given a provision of a code where no, obligatory fees are taken, because they relatively have low transactions. So for greater participation in this DPI, this thing has been enabled. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Sorry for me cutting this short, but everyone will get more time later. We just need to move through the room at least once.
To focus on cyber security, so probably I will
come back
cover.
to it.
Yes, that's an important.
I'd like Kunal Raj Barua, who's online. Yeah, thanks. He's Associate Director at Aapti Institute. In your opening remarks, just wondered if you could give us some idea about, what are the design assumptions in the system? Where do they break down when you're talking about vulnerable the sub-segments? Kunal?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me on the panel and for I think a lot of the points that I had answered before or brought up before as well. Um, in terms of I think how some of and I'll speak more from the lens of the bottom-up approaches that we typically rely on, but a lot of the areas in which exclusionary practices come up or whether specific types of pitfalls emerge, especially when design is incorporated, is typically around thinking around the journey of the user, right? So, for example, what we have seen through a lot of our work is that there has been um, assumptions around where the pitfalls emerge and where it actually emerges in reality. So, for example, we did a study some time back on digital ID systems, which understood that there was a lot of pitfalls, especially for specific types of communities and population groups. And I think that was something that emerged for us and I think to the point that was addressed before us today as well, those continue to stay an issue, whether it's from a design perspective or from a deployment perspective as well. So, how do we overcome this is that we have been trying to think about almost failure architectures. Um, if we can create almost a taxonomy of the ways in which design assumptions are created, or if in the ways in which systems fail or our pitfalls emerge, how do we taxonomize it so that we can create specific interventions, especially when we're thinking about improving system design? This sort of approach of taxonomizing this allows us to think about various lenses, various ways in which some of these addressable strategies can be put in place, but also that it allows us to categorize where all the systems might need improved system design, improved system building. And a lot of the assumptions that I think we've tried to grapple with is that a lot of this is about improving the service delivery part of such systems as critical infrastructure. But ultimately, if you are trying to build this system, it has to be built for transparency. How do you increase or improve explainability? And I think to the points made before me around the intersection of AI and DPI, especially now, capacity of last mile operators, officials. That's something that we're also trying to work with the Capacity Building Commission of India. How do you kind of think about navigation through, especially when the online system isn't necessarily as reliable? So what is the offline architecture that needs to be put in place to strengthen or to complement that of the online architecture? I think, I mean, I would love to continue mirroring some of the points made earlier, but I'll hand it over back to you.
Okay, thanks. Just to clarify, the taxonomy that you're talking about is work in progress with you?
So this is we are trying to build out a few of them. We have just done it with UPI systems, especially when it comes to fraudulent activities.
Okay.
So what are the various ways in which frauds emerge? Who are the actors present in them? What are the various ways in which both domestic and international frauds can occur? So we're trying to use those same principles. That one has been completed, but this one is something that we're trying to sort of work in collaboration with a few organizations and build out over time. But yes, work in progress.
Okay, thanks. Rakesh Maheshwari, he's also joining us online. So, he's there, but
hello.
Yeah. Good morning, sir. Rakesh Maheshwari is the former Senior Director in GC for Cyber Laws, Cybersecurity, Data Governance at the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, which is a nice abbreviation actually because it's mighty. So, so I'd just like you to talk about, what are the existing legal and regulatory frameworks whether they are adequately addressing the risks which are there in the system for cybersecurity. Others. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thank you. I mean, primarily, I will be talking about the two aspects, cybersecurity, which has already been talked about, but I'll also be having my views. And then, of course, the new Privacy Act, the DPDP Act, and its applicability in respect of government organizations, and particularly the kind of projects that we are talking of today. So in terms of security, as conveyed by Professor Sir also, that the landscape of threat perception has significantly changed, and particularly with AI coming and new threats like one which has been shown to be there by cloud mythos are going to be the realities. Maybe today it is mythos, tomorrow it will be some other, and today it may be with only some limited vetted companies or vendors. Tomorrow it can be in the hands of unscrupulous people also. And therefore, this is one threat which has to be, for which the country has to be prepared in full. Of course, certain meetings have already been held, critical meetings have already been held, certain has already issued certain advisories, organizations have been asked to be just ready for any kind of thing, but definitely it calls for some sort of a red teaming and maybe proactive kind of testing, which I'm sure must already be being done. Government for that reason has already conveyed through CERT as well as the cybersecurity division of Ministry of Electronics and IT that with respect to the government organizations, certain requirements are considered mandatory. So maybe those communications have gone specifically to government departments only. Rest, from guideline perspective, certain keeps publishing as to what any organization, including government organization, should continue to do. We already have CCMPs, which is Cyber Crisis Management Plan. We already mandate GIGW compliance for all government websites and portals. But the fact also remains that the government may not have the core competence, and they depend heavily on the SIs, system integrators, and various vendors who finally provide the services. Long back, we had the concept of strategic control, that the strategic control should continue to be with the government. And therefore, I'm not saying that it is not there, but definitely in view of the emerging threats, in view of the expanding, I'll say, use cases, there is a continual need for ensuring that such strategic control continues to be with the government. We have, in fact, many RFPs for all such kind of projects which must have been given. But we have also seen that all of these have a duration of around 5 years, and after 5 years, the SI needs to be, or performance of SI needs to be reviewed, the contract needs to be reviewed, and any time changes have happened from one SI to another SI, sometimes it has resulted into problems of continuity. And precisely for this reason, maybe across the board, what exactly do we learn by any RFP which has been successful or not so successful is what needs to be documented and incorporated, so that any changes into the projects which continue to or which will continue to happen is reasonably accounted for, budgeted for. Otherwise, things don't really go the best way. The organizational structure, the control and oversight on the vendors, and problems because of AI have to be seen in totality. We are into the age of multiple clouds or hybrid clouds, and hence, how do we really ensure that we continue to maintain the required level of security. And not just about security, as was mentioned during the talk, it's also about efficiency and the quality of service that is being provided. And therefore, in most of such large projects, we had the service level management as I'll say SLAs kind of requirements. Once again, they are very fine and they need to be defined at the beginning of the project, at the RFP stage itself. But during the whole life cycle of the project, the requirement of various service parameters do change. And unless the RFP has such kind of provisions and means of measurement, and it was also being conveyed that there are certain fringe, I'll say, edge cases which must be reviewed. So while in majority of the cases services do get delivered on time, but then there are multiple variables for which are we really able to give the services on time, or what can be the new service level agreements which need to be worked out. And my specific example come primarily from the Passport Seva project, wherein
Sir, if I could just interrupt, I'm sorry, but could we take the
maybe 2 more
example
minutes.
for later?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now coming to the privacy part, coming to the DPDP Act, which is equally applicable to government organizations, number one. And government organizations, because of the volume of data that is handled, they will tend to be the significant data fiduciaries. Now, most of the times, government organizations, because of the law, because of the licensing requirement, because of the DBT, because of authorizations, may not be required to maybe have the same kind of notice and consent which private organizations need to offer. But the fact remains that the law continues to be applicable to government organization. The requirement of data minimization, requirement of purpose limitation, requirement of informed, at least informed, not the consent, but informed, creating user aware of what data is being collected and processed. And when we talk of whole of the government approach, we are also talking of data moving from one project to another project, so as to avoid duplication of data collection and consistency and correctness. But it also creates a problem of maybe transparency and that informed and maybe the purpose limitation and data limitation which are going to be there. What it really means is that for all such I'll say user heavy kind of projects, there should be, by way of the act itself, there should be a DPIA, there should be a data protection officer, a dedicated data protection officer to be designated, something like what was done in cybersecurity as CISOs. Particularly, all of them will be and are using AI in one way or other. So this aspect of algorithmic processing also needs to be evaluated while doing the DPIA. And maybe like the crisis management plan, we also have to have the privacy management plan. We have to have privacy incident management plans. So what I am therefore trying to convey is, like we have done what we have done in security, the government organizations and the projects should also have something similar in respect of privacy as well. They are accountable under the law.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Okay, so that was actually a very practical take on where the legal positioning is. If I could go to Dr. Sandeep Kumar Shukla now, who's also joining online. It's interesting, a lot of the data people are joining online.
Good afternoon.
Professor and director at IIIT Hyderabad.
Hi. Couple of things. So, first of all, we have already heard about the cybersecurity concerns, especially with the current threat landscape with MITRE and other associated developments in the world of generative AI, agentic AI, and so on. And but sometimes I feel like we are trying to put plaster on things which are fundamentally broken. For example, I spoke to people about this direct benefit transfer. We spoke about the issue of CBDC, which are programmable, so that you can only use it for specific shops and specific merchants and so on. But turns out that all of that, Indians are very good in jugaad, and all of that can be circumvented. And the circumvention happens because, for example, if you have a programmable CBDC, your merchant might not be as, unless you do a supply chain tracking with RFID and blockchain and all that stuff, your merchant could actually be the place where your money is going to be exchanged into regular money, and then alcohol can be purchased from that money. We have seen this we have heard this in the agriculture, fertilizers.
We are aware of it, sir.
Excuse me?
We are aware of it.
Okay. So that is one thing. So the other thing that we have seen is that even the money that women empowerment with direct benefit transfer, we have seen their bank accounts being operated by other people, including people of political affiliation and so on. So that's one thing. Second thing is that we talk about Jan Dhan Yojana as one of the trinities, and but that has also been used as mule accounts, and mule account is one of the biggest concern in today's Indian cybercrime situation. So that's another thing that we have to think about, that while we have empowered people, we also have created a huge amount of criminal possibilities. The third thing that I think problematic is that the use of biometry as a fundamental identification and authentication mechanism. While it is good, but if biometry is leaked or biometry is stolen, then you have no recourse. So this is something that we must be very, very careful about. And we have done something that is very very, very convenient. So we always say that there is a trilemma, right? Like you have security, you have convenience, and you have scale, and you cannot achieve all of them together. So what happened is that with Aadhaar, we have created a huge centralized identification structure for a country that is supposedly constitutionally supposed to be is supposed to be a federated country, where identity should also have been federated. I understand that there are legal issues, there are trust issues and other things, but this has created a huge vulnerability, because if at all this identity system is ever attacked by some very powerful adversary, we are actually in big trouble. And we have seen a lot of leakage of Aadhaar through Aadhaar seeded databases at various agencies and state entities. We have seen other information leaking through other means. So I think that while we are doing well in terms of using Aadhaar enabled payment system, Aadhaar as an authentication, eKYC, etc., we also have seen that fake, very recently, like last week, we saw a case of use of fake video KYC, right? So we're using deepfake. So I think that while we are very, very happy about the fact that we have done digitally very well and we are one of the pioneers in the world and so on, but I am not sure that we should always be in such celebratory mode, because we might have created something that could actually backfire in a very, very large way, given the threat landscape and given the cybersecurity concern. Because decentralization is a bad thing from a cybersecurity perspective. Decentralization is a way to actually create resilience. But we have very early on centralized our identity system, centralized our payment systems, and so on, which might have very good benefits in the short run, but in the long run, I think that they may or may not be that good because resilience is going to become more and more difficult to achieve, and putting plaster on things which are fundamentally broken might not be the solution for a longer term future.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, this is, I think, getting more and more realistic now. If you can go to Anita Gurumurthy, who's also online. She's the Executive Director and Senior Fellow at IT for Change. Ma'am.
Thank you so much, and pleasure to be here. I was asked to focus on data governance dimensions. I just wanted to check when I have 30 seconds left, so please feel free to interrupt me when I have 30 seconds left. Yes. So this is an area where we are learning something new every day. And as Tiwari ji mentioned, what I want to say is that we should aspire to a state where efficiency and inclusion are not a binary. I'd like to actually make 3 submissions that DPIs need data governance regimes that are rights respecting. Second, that governance of DPIs needs a techno-legal imagination rooted in public accountability. And thirdly, that the introduction of DPIs in welfare requires recalibrating traditional institutional design for state-citizen interaction, or broadly what in the political literature is called the social contract. So the first is data governance based on rights. World over, experience shows that free, informed, and prior consent is necessary, but not sufficient to safeguard against risk of harms and secondary data uses. Data markets, of course, need robust governance frameworks, and this is very important at this juncture in India, where citizen data is also used in anonymized aggregate ways in the data market. In the context of DPIs and welfare, this debate assumes great significance because the vision of e-governance 3.0 of the government is about network governance, where public and private sector actors come together to build on top of DPI architectures. Therefore, our DPDPA needs strengthening in the form of additional safeguards to understand what associated forms of governance may be needed in data markets. So welfare data going into data markets is a very important boundary question for governance, and therefore stronger adherence to privacy by design, data minimization, purpose limitation, points that Rakesh ji mentioned will become really important. One important sector is the APAR ID in India's education sector, which also involves data of children. I think API-based data sharing is emphasized in this, and we imagine in this framework free data exchange between edtech companies, analytics firms, recruitment agencies, advertisers, etc. So we really need to figure out how rights may be really respected in this. The second point is about the techno-legal imagination, and here I'd like to talk about citizen data portability, where we need to distinguish between interoperability in the DPI architecture from citizen data portability, because when it comes to welfare, interoperability does not automatically translate into the right to data portability. So efficiency is important for the bureaucracy, but it is even more important for the citizen, and we need to strengthen a design that uses the DPI interfaces to enable single window service delivery experience for the citizen, rather than make the presence-less, paperless kind of context somehow morph into more presence, more running around, and pillar to post type of experience, which sometimes tends to happen in the last mile. Within public accountability and techno-legal imaginaries, I'd also like to emphasize the right to an audit trail of welfare decisions and citizen records. And this is, of course, not only, this is very much present in the literature, not only in the experience of Estonia, but also immutable public blockchain ledgers with all its limitations. It's not a panacea, but this would enable meaningful transparency and the citizen right to explanation and audit of decisions when there is a contestation. And finally, my point about institutional design. There should be, in the context of India, really no digital by default, because I think this is an old debate. Permit me to bring it back, because I think what's really useful to understand that inclusivity, as was pointed out earlier also, Even a 0.1% in a country of our size is really about many people. And indeed, as many of us in civil society would argue, one person hungry is one too many. So I would like to emphasize that especially Estonia set up boards to govern different categories of services. So when you're providing welfare services, whether it's pensions or public health, insurance, I think it's really important to set up different boards. I'd like to conclude with this point on data rights are citizen rights, and we need to strengthen two things in India. One is the right to correction. While the possibility of correction is indeed programmed into Aadhaar, I think it's not easy. It's pretty difficult for citizens at the last mile. And the idea that there should be a right to explanation, which I have already outlined before, but I do think that we may need to introduce delegated legislation as we introduce algorithms and AI on scale in order to guarantee a right to explanation and the right against automated denial of welfare services, which I think our Australian colleagues will certainly appreciate here. What I want to conclude with is, as Rajeev pointed out, the DPI-enabled welfare systems at population scale require trustworthiness. And he did outline some dimensions of it, but I would like to add that trustworthy systems need two more kind of dimensions. One is contestability, and the last is corrigibility, the potential to look and change based on facts and evidence. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Srinivas Kodali, he's an independent researcher. So I think a large part of what you normally talk about has been said by Dr. Shukla. So
sure. So, I mean, there's a lot of talk on security. So I'm going to go a little deeper into cyber. Okay. When we talk of security.
Possible, can you give some solutions? Yeah, thanks.
Or
recommendations.
I'll refrain from it, but I'll talk about the challenges.
Recommendations, suggestions.
Yeah. So when you talk of security, we all often talk of cyber security, but I think we really need to define what cyber is, right? Like when you look at what cyber is, it comes from the science of cybernetics. The Indian state's plans on cybernetics, which is what you can trace Aadhaar, the roots of Aadhaar to, begin with Norbert Wiener's visit to India in 1954, the father of cybernetics. Anyway, I can tell you this history is a lot more later, but when you talk of cybersecurity, there are all these frameworks like zero trust architecture, which come from cryptographic frameworks, which have a history of distrust in the state. So when it came to Aadhaar and zero trust frameworks, I would say don't trust the government, don't trust the state. And it is exactly what we did when we forced the state to bring virtual Aadhaar during the whole legal case around Aadhaar. We said, look, the state is trying to interlink Aadhaar across databases to build what you're now calling the social registry system. A 360-degree model, which, by the way, the Supreme Court said is impossible with Aadhaar. I can quote Justice Shekhar on this. He says, such a system is impossible to build. If we ever build one, it would be unconstitutional. These are his exact words in the majority judgment. Now, when we talk of cybersecurity and vulnerability, it's a form of networked vulnerability. Okay, these are systems that have been built with cybernetics and systems thinking, which have certain properties like mathematical properties. And one of the important properties is you have to look at the whole of the system and not its parts. So when we talk of DBT, when we talk of Aadhaar identity, I don't think we should talk about it in parts. So let's talk about the whole. The whole here is the mathematical model of that 360-degree model that they are building with the social registry system, which, by the way, have been implemented in few states, particularly Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, which also resulted in 360-degree profiling and policing, where the state has profiles of every citizen. You call it DBT as a direct benefit transfer. I would call it direct benefit tracking. With its applications in elections, where the state is now choosing who the voter is, right? The real issue of security to citizens, or rather privacy impacts to citizens, is in the Indian elections, where the state also tried to link Aadhaar with voter ID, which, by the way, is now going through the SIR. Anyway, so when you talk of the techno-legal imaginations that the state is saying, it's rather the realities and the state imaginations are not on the same page. And to us as citizens, the state's idea of security doesn't equate with the constitutional right to privacy.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thanks. That's given it a much wider perspective than our workshop, which is DPT. But yeah, we get the general the point. Shweta Banerjee, she's country lead India for BRAC International. Significant, considerable experiences at the ground level. So tell us, Shweta, what do you think? In 5 minutes or less now.
2 minutes only, I think. So thank you, Sumita, for inviting us here. Thank you, Payal, and thank you to the Australian government as well. BRAC is currently working in India just on one program, which is a Samaveshi Ajivika Yojana, led by the Ministry of Rural Development to reach the last 5%. So Rajesh, I'm still working on the last 5%, even though, you know, Rajesh and I go back a long way. I was at the World Bank working on DBT in 2012, 2013. So through this program, we're currently supporting 6 states, and the program is being launched across 6,450 villages. And we've trained about 2,000 coaches to reach 65,000 households, and the government intends to reach at least 500,000 households in the next 5 years, though the need is much more. It's about 21, 22 million households overall. So what we are finding is that even though there is an MIS system that DIC has, you know, set up, the last mile connectivity and also the sort of fragmented nature of the data system is preventing the sort of uploading of data in real time throughout these districts. And these are sort of very hard to reach areas like Nandurbar, for example. So what we're doing is supplementing the coaches who visit the household every week with all kinds of manual, forms, as well as M-Water Google Forms. And then they go to the block office and upload the information. So we're still back in the days of the BC, banking correspondent challenges that we were facing in 2010, 2012. The other thing we found is that many of our participants, there are 54 to 56% of our participants are STs and PVTG community participants, and they don't have Aadhaar card. And so the first task of the coach is to link them to Aadhaar, and through that, all the other entitlements that they are required to access. 4% of the adults that we surveyed who had an Aadhaar card had errors. And so that also then prevents them to access the system. And I think going back to the, the financial inclusion wave that we had 15 years ago, remember we talked about how the financially excluded was scared of even going into a bank. And I think we find the same thing with our participants here. They don't want to engage with this system of DPI as well as the government. There's a sort of lack of confidence, some mistrust, and some just, practical consideration that prevents them. I remember going to a household, extremely vulnerable household, 500 meters from the district office in Chamarajnagar. And they had not walked into the district office. The district office was unaware of them. So this program is about making these people visible to the state, and then the state can kind of reach out to them. But I think the key learning here is that the human connector is as important as the sophistication of the DPI, and that remains. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Actually getting us into the human part of what this whole system is about. Nikita Quatra, who's a principal at Artha Global, they've done a lot of work. I'd like you to talk about the difficulties that migrants have been facing in portability specifically.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Kalyan. Thanks, ICRIER, for inviting. And the points you were making actually is very good segue for what I wanted to speak about as well. And just, I think this conversation around migration and social protection is just going to be increasingly important for India, given structurally it's going to be very defining for the economy, the way jobs are moving, etc., climate-related migration. And why it's critical to this conversation is because I think we've been talking a lot about DPI-enabled social welfare, and migrants as a vulnerable population becomes the ultimate test bed for how well, continuity of some of these benefits and travel with people when they move from one place to the other. And one thing that's happened, worked really well and got more impetus since pandemic. All of us know there's a lot more recognition of mobility and portability in social protection in policy thinking. It's not absent from policy conversations anymore, which is great, but recognition of these in principle versus governance in practice, there's just a huge gap still. And I'd like to bring up two factors more specifically. I think India has done very well when it comes to DPI's artifacts and in building those pipelines of Aadhaar, UPI, etc. And it solves for a lot of reasons I wouldn't get into. We've spoken about identification, authentication, etc. But I think the principles of DPI as an approach, what Mr. Bansal was speaking about as well, the whole of government approach, the whole idea of build once, use many times hasn't happened. So what happens is it's very visible when you look at social protection as this world of duality where we live in, whereas it almost amounts to harassment when the amount of data collection India does at the frontline level, both for Anganwadis, Asha workers, in terms of the workload, plus in terms of the citizens who have to repeatedly give this data still. And at the same time, when it comes to decision making, because we're doing it for single purpose, the data is lost when it comes to actually planning and decision making. So both things are happening at the same time. So the idea of registries is very important. But having said that, the other problem, and it makes it's more visible when it comes to migrants, is the onus is still on the beneficiary to access the state, which is why the point of human connector becomes important. And for migrants, if you really understand the nature of migration in India, this is very critical because a lot of this is circular, seasonal. And why the problem is beyond recognition is while with ONORC, we've seen it sort of solved in policy thinking now, on paper, PDS travels with people. But you look at the uptake of it. If you look at the data beyond Delhi, there's very less uptake because migrants are able to use canteens, etc. So there are two problems here. One is the nature of the welfare that you're trying to provide. So suddenly things will look very different when it comes to healthcare and childcare. And by the way, women and children are absolutely absent when it comes to recording. So there is a huge difference between identification, which Aadhaar has solved for, versus visibility, which we haven't solved for. So a study we did a few years back in Melghat in Maharashtra, they were actually building a Melghat migration tracking system. And the motivation for that was that it so happened that the district magistrate was a doctor previously. So she noticed some unusual patterns in severe acute malnutrition. And when she sort of overlay that data with migration patterns, it seems like there were periods where vaccination was discontinued for people who were traveling. And which is why they sort of built a system where from one district to the other and one place to the other, when a person moves, can Anganwadis who know their, to the point of human connector, who actually know who lives in a village and who moves where, are inputting some data system of X is going to travel to Y. And then at the destination, because this is an incomplete link, linking that this person has actually come here. And they were sort of working on the system of visibility and traceability to, now that this person has come, X% of vaccination is done, this so much. So the onus was sort of moved back from the beneficiaries who don't have the time to do all of this back to the state. So I thought as a principle, it was very important. The way they were doing it, whether scalable, I mean, there's a lot for debate. I know I'm close to my time. There are a few other points I want to make about it, but maybe when we take forward the conversation, we can speak about
Okay,
this.
thanks so much, Nikita. Let's move to Rajendran. Rajendran Narayanan is an associate professor in the School of Arts and Sciences at the Azim Premji University. And a lot of your work is about, again, the same issue of it, the responsibility moving from the state to the citizen. So you could please talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ICRIER, for giving me this opportunity. And I think I'll build on what Nikita has said. There are a few common themes that I have seen in working in rural social policy over the last 1.5 decades, and I'm just trying to distill some of them here. One is this whole idea of shifting the burden of accountability from the state to the citizens, which I think has happened dramatically in the last few years. And the way it plays out on the ground is the following. Is that very strict targets are set to the frontline officials. They have to achieve 100% linkage between, let's say, I'll take the example of the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, NREGA. So NREGA, the officials were given very Aadhaar-based payment systems became mandatory in 2021. Prior to that, there were two options available for payment systems. There was the account-based system and the Aadhaar and the ABPS. Now, when officials were given strict targets, what many officials resorted in doing was that even when there is a demographic mismatch in the spelling, for example, if even one letter is different between your job card and your Aadhaar, then the officials went on to delete the worker's name from the NREGA database. So what this resulted in was massive large-scale deletions that happened across the country. Nearly 9 crore workers were deleted. And there were many cases that I have personally investigated in multiple parts of the country where I met the worker who was an active worker who had worked in the last 1 year, but their names got deleted. And this entire system is also happening when I met this MIS operator in Raichur district in Karnataka, and he had a very interesting phrasing. He said that he had called a meeting of all the frontline data entry operators from Raichur district to the district headquarters. And he said, "Aap inse baat kijiye, aapko color idea milta," in a very beautiful Dakhini style. What he meant was color idea milta in the sense that every data entry operator had a very different interpretation of what constitutes linking Aadhaar with job card, because the protocols were very haphazard. None of them had a clear-cut understanding of what needs to be done. So they did a lot of these kind of linkage based on their own interpretation of what they thought was correct. Now, when that happens, when a worker's name is deleted from the job card, the entire onus is on the worker to find out why my job card got deleted and what I can do to make sure that I can start matching. So now the worker is trying to match different documents. And this is what I think Jean had written an article called a Perpetual Aadhaar Alignment Problem, and very beautifully acronymed PAP. And it's a very interesting thing because, and it's true, it's how it plays out on the ground, that my name in Aadhaar, my name in ration card, my name in job cards, etc., there would be variations. It's not like how we do it in the cities. In rural India, it's widely different. So in many situations, a worker, a NREGA worker or an Anganwadi worker or maternity entitlements, women, I think you talked about it, which is a huge problem because when a woman gets married and goes to a new village, it is entirely the onus of the entry operator to decide what name I should give you. So this is in particular in the Hindi heartland, my name might be Anita Kumari. Now when I get married, it becomes Anita Devi. Now in my Aadhaar card, it will be Anita Kumari. But now the data entry operator in my new village will decide whether I should be Kumari or Devi. Now, when that person decides what my name is, my name changes in the database, and hence my access to maternity entitlements becomes fraught. So when the time comes for me to access maternity entitlements, I have to go to Aadhaar Seva Kendras and find ways to fix it. Now, there are many points. But when I try to fix it, what happens is that many times there is for a name change, it's a very complicated, I might have to do a gazette notification, etc. And many times the message that I get, the Seva Kendra operator gets, is also something like Rule 28 of Aadhaar regulations is violated. Now, Aadhaar Seva Kendra operator doesn't have no clue. Forget about Anita Devi, who's trying to get maternity entitlements. So these are some real challenges, and the architecture, I think I'll just make one comment here and I'll stop, which we need to really address, which is very well articulated in a book by my friend Rajesh Veeraraghavan, who wrote this book called Patching Development, where he underscores that three ways in which the digital state is operating. One is it's top-down, one is it is iterative, and one it is detail-oriented. And in the process, what happens is in the MIS for job card deletions, I saw that there is a button which says unwilling to work. And our analysis suggests that we analyzed large-scale data, and we found that nearly 2/3 of the workers whose job cards were deleted on the grounds of being unwilling to work, which is actually not as per law. So these are some contentious things that we need to deal with, that when you're deleted because for no fault of yours, how do you make the state accountable? So I'll stop here.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I'm sure there's lots more that you could say. Sorry for having to cut you short here. Arjita Madan, Chief Product Officer for Indus Action, sorry. I just wanted to get from you a little bit of perspective of the state and local government issues, and if there are any best practices that I really want to hear something positive from somebody. So if there is any, that is.
Okay, I think the mic is on. Okay, great. Yeah. So Indus Action, I'll just begin by just introducing what the organization does, and then I'll get to your question. Basically, what we do is we look at how to help vulnerable citizens get access to social entitlements, and we take a very human-centered design approach. So we work at the last mile with state governments, and we basically have a framework, what we call administrative burden. It's not our proprietary framework, it's a common term. But what we do is we look at it from a citizen lens, and we say when a citizen is trying to get an entitlement, what are all the burdens that they face, whether it's in terms of money or time or cognitive overload or psychological cost, what are the sources of those, and how can we simplify that journey, right? And what we've found over the years, Indus Action was started in 2013, and now the citizen impact is upwards of 3 million. And the welfare benefits that we have been able to help citizens access is upwards of 5,000 crore. And what we really found is that technology is that enabler where we have been able to generalize digital public goods. So just some examples, right to education, we have a digital public good, which allows an end-to-end MIS for state to actually set up access to RTE and enable citizens to access scholarships, right? We have discovery protocols where using family IDs, citizens can actually get matched to the top 10 schemes. And our observation has been that through these digital public goods, we are able to replicate impact and get to the scale of impact so far that we have gotten to. And it's entirely based on the fact that in India, we are sitting on a very powerful foundation of DPI. Right. So now I'll get to the positive part. I think we have, organizations like ours have benefited from basically building on top of the foundation that JAM has set and really being able to benefit from technologies like DBT. And I was very happy to hear Shri Tiwari sir talked about DBT 3.0, because our vision is very much aligned that we should move into a world where the state can proactively reach a citizen when the citizen needs a particular entitlement. So what we've seen is there are certain moments in a citizen's life that matter for them to be able to get access and get protection. And if in that moment they are able to get it, whether it's the moment of like maternity benefits, as you mentioned, scholarships, it could be a negative moment like a job loss or a health shock. Being able to access protection in that moment actually changes the trajectory of their life, because if not for that benefit, they may go into negative coping strategies. Parents may take their kids out of school. They may do things that will actually put them in a much worse state than they were before. So when we look at this proactive framework, and we have a DPI foundation that enables us to really have that imagination. So I'll give an example of UP, where with the family ID, the state has been able to go beyond just payments to actually being able to proactively identify eligible citizens, to actually being able to track the delivery and even see and address failures before they compound. So I'll just close by maybe sharing a bit about my past life before I joined Intersection. I used to work as a product leader at Google. And I was lucky enough to see UPI in the early days. So I was part of the founding team for Google Pay. Hopefully you all use it. And I think UPI is one example where we all kind of think, unanimously think, hey, this has been a success story for India. It's something we talk about not only to other Indians, but even to our friends abroad. We always brag about it. And I still remember when we had just launched Google Pay, we saw this and we were working with all the players in the ecosystem, the banks, payment gateways, everybody. And if you remember UPI in the early days, it was very hard to link your bank account. And I'll share just an early glimpse in the first initial days. And really, when we launched Google Pay, UPI was very new. The failure rate was more than half. More than half people, the first time they tried to link their bank account, they could not do it because it was a very technically complex process. It required a lot of players to do the right things. And it was a long journey. And I will say, I think what we were able to achieve with UPI, just as a nation and as an ecosystem, was it is not just a technical complexity, but the fact that for the user, the experience became very simple. And even if it failed, it would give you a very, very simple output to why it failed. And I think, I always think about like UPI has been a long journey. And I think there's a long way to go, even with the, as we talked about, there are some exclusion issues, there are issues with DBT. But I think we have really a big opportunity in front of us. So I'll close there before I get the bell.
Thanks a lot. Sunaina Kumar, Director for the Center for New Economic Diplomacy and Senior Fellow at the ORF. Could you just talk about the gender angle?
Yes.
A lot of people have spoken already from women, from the point of view of women, but if you could just bring it out a little more deeply. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Sumita. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for inviting me, ICRIER. So a lot of our research on this, there's a lot that we do on tech policy. I have looked at social protection and digital financial inclusion from a gender lens, keeping in mind India's economic diplomacy and global South learnings. So we are all aware of the gaps. The CEC talked about it. Many others, my co-panelists have talked about it. I'm going to underline some of those and also maybe bring up some examples which are more recently reported. The first thing to really talk about is that we are measuring program success, but we're not really measuring beneficiary outcomes. So the sort of gap in data, like collecting systemic gender disaggregated data to understand if the woman, after the transfer is made, is she withdrawing the money? And also, does she have to pay a middleman? If her account is frozen, where does she go for redressal? So this is a blind spot. We have sporadic news reports. We have limited, really good research, but this needs to deepen. And the absence of data is also what is invisibilizing the problem. The second part here is that exclusion is not just about delivery when it comes to women beneficiaries, but also quite often a problem of design. So if we look at eligibility criteria, and let's look at UCTs, which a lot of state governments in India have brought out as a populist welfare measure. If we look at a case like Haryana, where the Lado Lakshmi scheme was rolled out last year, the government identified 5.2 lakh female beneficiaries, while the total electorate is of 95 lakh women. So there were many reports that looked at how women could not complete the eKYC, the documentation could not be completed. And then, of course, the eligibility criteria is extremely complex in most of these programs. They have to be living in the state for 15 years. They must not be a taxpayer. Household income should be below 2.5 lakh and so on. So last mile gaps can be both technical, but can also be architectural. The third part is that, and of course, this has been brought out below, but before this, but if the systems include women, they are asked to fix the exclusions themselves. And the process, of course, is already complex and compounded by factors like time, poverty, and geography. So, for example, in Maharashtra, less than 3 months ago, 90 lakh women were removed from the Majhi Ladki Yojana, the program, and they were struck off as ghost beneficiaries and as an example of fiscal prudence. Now, most of these women did not know why the payment stopped. And for them to get reinstated, they have to go to the website, they have to check the reason, they have to upload documents, they have to go to Common Service Center. Now, that is very difficult because your typical female beneficiary is looking after young children, after aging parents, managing a farm, doing extra work, cooking, cleaning, many other tasks. How will she find the time to go through this process of reinstating herself? And also given the fact that mobility is quite limited. This gets compounded by geography. Again, we talked about this earlier, but tribal blocks in Orissa, female Manrega workers spend a full day to visit a bank. In Andhra Pradesh, pregnant tribal women travel over 50 kilometers to avail maternity benefits. So the fourth part is that last mile solutions for women itself is underfunded. And here I would like to talk about BC Sakhis. There was a report by Microsave, which many of us might have seen, which showed that it takes a full year for a BC Sakhi to earn an income of rupees 1,000 on a monthly basis. So, like all other female rural cadres, it is a subsidized service rather than a viable livelihood. We can get to solutions, but I'll come back to that.
Thanks a lot, because this is a good segue to our next speaker, Mr. Sunil Kulkarni, who's CEO of the Business Correspondents Federation of India. Just like gender disaggregate data has been one of our asks for, I don't know, now decades, viability of the business, correspondence network is another one of those asks. So,
yeah, thank you, Sumita, and I promise you I'll be less than 4 minutes. Yeah, I think basically, if you look at it, there were more negative views about, so let me, or glass half empty. I'll probably put glass half full in this room. What has happened is that, mythos or AI or everything else, the cybercrime, etc., etc. One good thing has happened in DPI is that you're putting a person who is a business correspondent for financial services. And that's where the link breaks. So the business correspondent is certified, he is belonging to a bank, and then he is also responsible if there are any chargebacks, frauds, etc., etc. So from that perspective, at least you have now 2 million BCs who are doing these businesses, especially the AUPS, cash in, cash out, and domestic money transfer. But as Rajesh mentioned, the pie did not happen. In fact, it has been reversed. The first, it was 1% commission for AUPS transaction, subject to now maximum of 15 rupee. Which is now been brought down to 0.5%. So there is 3.14, which was the recommendation, and it is now 0.5%. So clearly, as you have mentioned, BC Sakhi, or for that matter, any BC, 90% of the BCs, the 2 million BCs, are non-viable from the commercial point of view. So one is that you need to have better commercials. Second is increased services. For the last 10 years, we are doing AEPS and DMT, and now even DMT will be part of the AEPS. It is called third-party cash-in. But there are services which, are really need of the hour. For example, 500 million Jan Dhan account are now required to be re-KYC'd. Now, this re-KYC requires all of them to go to BC, but now they belong to ICICI Bank, so they can go to ICICI Bank BC only, which is very limited, or the bank branch. So there is a model which works, which is interoperable eKYC and re-KYC, which with the Face ID is a really viable proposition that needs to be brought in by regulator on that, which will become really a very large viable proposition for the BCs. Similarly, account aggregator, as consent through biometric consent through BC is a consent that can be given to a large number of customers for bringing account aggregator. And this is a model I worked with RBIH, where we worked on assisted account aggregator for bringing instant loans, digital credit to the customer. Similarly, I mean, live test for LIC, that why do you need to go to bank branch? You can do it at any of the BC level. So some of these services have not been brought in. So one is that whatever service you have brought in are not viable standalone, but even new services which are need of the hour need to be brought in fairly quickly on that perspective. And you have these 2 million BCs, out of which 3 lakh are so-called banking outlet, which means now, as per the new RBI guideline, they are like a bank branch. So they will have some 30, 40 services. All of them can be what is available in the bank branch. So I'll pause here and look for more discussion. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Beni Chug, who's online with us. She's practice head for the Future of Finance Initiative at Dwara Research. Beni has done a lot of work on grievance redressal as it works and actually should be working for DVT. So your thoughts, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Samita.
I'll just interrupt when there's 1 minute to go. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. And I regret not being there in person, but we'll try to make the most of this. Thank you. It's been an enriching conversation, and I have very little to add. Before I just steep into the grievance redress part of it, I think for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been looking at DPI, especially from the lens of social protection. You may have heard of Dwara Research. We work on the intersection of financial inclusion and social protection. And my job is really about digitization of both. And so as part of my day job, we've been looking at what really makes social protection DPI work for the citizen and not the state. So we have a citizens first framing. And what I'm going to say next should take about a minute, but it should also kind of speak to various strands that we've heard over the course of the day. We now think that citizen centricity and inclusivity, as conceived in a DPI, is a composite of 4 dimensions, really. So it's not only about, are you targeting accurately? Are you targeting the right people? Are payment failures being minimized? But there's a lot more richness and nuance to what it means to be citizen-centric and what it means for the DPI to serve the citizen well. We identify 4 broad categories. The first is, of course, inclusivity itself. If the underlying databases are correct, if the underlying databases are actually audited and verified in due time, issues of the types that Rajendran was talking about, if your names have changed, are the databases reflecting them correctly, all of those. So one is just the health of the underlying database that is guiding the decisions of the entire setup from the ground up, right? So that's inclusivity. Inclusivity in India can also not be divorced from the fact of, having a rich network of physical touch points. And we often hear about agents overcharging, etc. I would just like to make a nuance between agents overcharging versus agents charging a premium for good service, right? We've kind of given it all a bad name, but we have to understand that the economics are so precarious. And from our own field research, we understand that citizens are able to, over a period of time, differentiate between the dependable, last mile agents versus the ones who are fly-by-night operations who are less reliable. And citizens willingly, as a mark of appreciation, as a mark of business continuity, pay more than what is. So I'm not saying everyone out there is not there being fleeced. That's happening as well. But we have to understand that the whole idea of agent economics is very, very critical to the idea of inclusion itself. And we cannot be like, painting it all with the same stroke. That's on inclusion. A second part of citizen centricity is responsibility. There's all of that data. With the data comes the responsibility for data. In terms of security aspects, keeping the data integrity intact and everything that comes from cybersecurity, Srinivas is the best person to speak about it, I feel, but also data privacy, citizen, and also in the context of the state relationship, right? I feel that the burden is heightened because it's not a corporate who's getting access to your data, it's the state who's getting access to your data. And therefore, just by that, the virtue of the citizen state contract, there's more obligation to keep that data safe. And now as we move into a world of AI, ensuring that AI that is being used is fit for purpose, is limited in its purpose as well, is responsible, explainable, transparent, trustworthy. All of those are going to become critical to the whole agenda of citizen centricity or putting citizens first in social protection DPIs. Third is efficiency. And this, I think, is slightly different from how the room may have appreciated efficiency up until this point. Efficiency up until this point has been described from the point of view of the administrator or the state, which is very, very important. The savings made, the leakages plugged, obviously with the idea that leakages plugged are going to benefit more people and it's going to plow back into the system. So that's very much appreciated. But there is this aspect of efficiency, which is also efficient for the citizen, right? And there is so much cheap technology available.
1 minute left. Huh?
So much cheap technology available for us to make that happen in terms of I'm 58 years today. I'll be 16 in 2 years. The system knows it. Can the system automatically now start my pension? Some states are already experimenting with it, but there's more to be done there. Just coming to the point of grievance redress, I think the beautiful unification of different processes that we have seen from onboarding to dispersal have not been translated into grievance redress. So grievance redress is still patchy. Everyone still has to kind of find for themselves where the transaction broke, at which loophole. Was it at the Aadhaar loophole, the NPCI? Was it at the node of the bank? Was it at the node of the PSP? Was it like an internet downtime? They have to figure it out for themselves. Error codes help, sure, but mostly people are left to fend like a very complicated value chain by themselves. And if there is one thing about grievance redress that should be changed is, can we make it as unified and as integrated as the rest of the process is? Can we make it a dashboard type experience, which is accessible not only on a screen, but also in ways where that can meet people where they are? I'm just going to pause here.
Thanks so much, Bini. Actually, this brings us to Sridhar Dhulipala, who's Principal Advisor Design for UIDAI, who'll take off, I think, on parts that you've been mentioning of how he can break the friction that users are feeling.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm working inside the tech center of UIDAI, and from the conversations, I think my world is a bit different because we are thinking more in the future. And to me, a lot of assumptions around what we think Aadhaar is, which was conceptualized in 2010-12, are changing in terms of even security. I mean, we are aware that we need to have newer protocols, and we are moving. I won't name the kind of algos. There is a lot of machine learning. There's a lot of AI. How can face-off improve? Things like that. And of course, there is a lot of focus on privacy with selective disclosure. We are embracing OpenID for verified credential presentations, which are global standards. So it's going to be, Aadhaar will be interoperable across the geography, around the boundary. So there are a lot of things which are happening. I mean, there are quite a few changes, and I think it's a different world, and I think they're quite clear that it's not something which we have fixed some time back. We just keep it running, keep the lights on. So I think there's a lot of progress and there's a lot of change. And I think one of the things which we all will see soon is when you start going into a hotel to check in or something, you don't have to give photocopies to anybody. You just disclose what you want. You have the control. So these are some of the things coming up, and I'm working on some of those experiences. And but I think I'm enjoying working in this space, and I think it's I've been in the private sector for quite some time, and now I'm here. But coming back to what I'm working on, I just want to share that focusing on just the DPI. if you keep the D out, PI, as in there's always physical public infrastructure, always. I mean, I think one of the things I was associated with was a while back was on designing for the hand pump, a toolkit for the maintenance of a hand pump. So I think I got to know about the 1972 mission to deploy over lakhs of hand pumps, cast iron ones across the country. And within a year or 2 years, over 74% of them failed. And I think there are a lot of lessons to learn from there. And I think the point Sunaina was making, that the check boxes are all there in programs, but are the beneficiaries getting them? So this is something we can learn from. And I think the water mission realized that we need to link water provision to health. And also local women were involved. The design of the pump was improved. The India Mark II is one of the best designs. It's an amazing design, engineering-wise. You just don't use the pump for short while, 6 months, and you press that twice, you get the water. The lift is there. So there are quite a lot of good improvements, and a woman who's motivated can maintain the pump easily, things like that. So I think the biggest thing is that P out there in the public infrastructure is actually the public, which is they associate things which are public as sarkari. So there is an association with apathy, and I think that was flipped with a community involvement and ownership. So I think that these are lessons we have already in terms of behaviors. So my focus when I'm working here, I've seen a couple of DPIs at EgStep as well as in UIDI. So I think we can learn a lot, and I'm using AI for that. And I think one of the biggest challenges with digital, I'll be very brief, is the lexicon that it introduces. People don't get it. And I think language translation doesn't work as well. So it just transliterates. QR code scan kijiye. The first 3 words are literally what it is. So digital mother tongue is English. And I think how do we work? So I'm working on some POCs with Saurabh's APIs to see how we can use multilingual, multimodal, and multi-model. So I'm trying to say, because the large language models are very good with English and they understand these semantic nuances well, but the local colloquial delivery, Saurabh does a much better job. So I feel there are a lot of these things which have to be done. I think the comprehension layer is something where if we can address. So I advocate for both, not just a DPI at a foundation level, but also DPI at the end user level, at what I'm calling a DPI experience, or the edge DPI. So using a combination, both need to work. So the user is empowered and there's more agency, as well as the DPI itself is technologically more robust.
Thanks. So actually moving into a more colloquial, local, vocal assistance
Absolutely
would also help in the digital part, in the tech part.
And AI can play a great role there.
In getting that, yeah. Though some words, I think like QR code and all are just used. Everyone kind of understands what it is now. But
yeah, but we are going to introduce more terminology because DPIs are going so much faster.
True.
Interoperability, tokenized assets.
No, I don't even understand those in English.
Yeah.
Okay. Pranay Sinha from Gates Foundation. I just would like you to know, like, what do you see overall, from if you take this entire experience for India, and what does it mean for the other countries? Can you just kind of bring it together?
Thanks a lot. I think I'll be within 5 minutes. So from Gates Foundation perspective, foundation has been functional in India for the last 24 years. And we see this journey, it's on the spectrum of digital, and then the payment gateways and DBTs and payment layers, and then data exchange, and then finally culminating into the narrative of digital public infrastructure. So that itself has been a journey for the country. And then now the DPI and AI intersection. So it's an onward journey from that spectrum. Before dwelling further, I have to also
confess that I started working in development sector in 2002. So I've seen pre-RTI days working within the government department at the district level and at the state level. And I was also engaged in pre-NREGA days also when those rural employment guarantee schemes. So on behalf of the rural development department. So whatever was mentioned, reaching to that registry equivalent to socioeconomic caste census database itself has been a journey for us as a country, I would say. And so where do we see the foundation that these are innovations in public space, public innovation, public governance, public financial management. And the experience of India is as relevant to all the aspirations of all the developing countries of all across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. What we discussed over the last 2.5 hours is that despite the diversity, the entry point from the state is from very different sectoral perspective. So what was mentioned by the additional secretary, the DBT and the amount of savings which the public exchequer has been able to achieve has actually allowed our fiscal space to be enhanced. And that's one space we see very relevant for all the LMICs, not even today's time, but even prior to that. The domestic financing is almost like 90 to 95% of all the LMIC's expenditure, public expenditure portfolio. It's only 5% to 10% probably coming from external resources, either through borrowing from ODA resources or through remittances or through FDI route. So that public finance, public space is a very sacrosanct sovereign space for every country. And that's where the experience of savings through the DPTs is extremely relevant and important for all the countries. Second, I would also kind of make a case for where do we see the social welfare mechanism. Every country, irrespective of the amount of public finance which they have to spend on social spending, even if it's through external borrowing, they do as an obligation for social welfare transfers. The efficiency gains through reducing the exclusion errors, inclusion errors are not only the savings for the public exchequer, but also opening up space for the governments to even enhance the deepening of more social welfare mechanisms. So I think the inclusion, the gender, the different perspective of inclusion would only be able to be achieved when the governments have that capacity to kind of exercise. And hence, the role of the DPI is extremely important. Now, having made this case, let's also now take the case of the countries which are not in India, but where the aspirations are. They also have their own digital journey, and they are in different phases, different trajectory, and different parts of their digital journey in their identity system, in their payment system, in their social benefit transfers, because they have also experienced the same journey which India has gone through. So the first principle of our DPI kind of collaboration is to meet the governments where they are. It's not something which could be exported from one country to another. The experiences are, thanks, I'll take a minute. So I think that what is important to prioritize that the countries are really looking forward to understand the experiences from a peer innovator. And here India, the public sector and the private sector are acting as a peer innovator for those countries, not to be taught, but also kind of to learn that what this counterpart they have undergone, and also how to kind of bring those learnings so that it could be adapted in my own context. And that's why the processes takes over the precedence over products. And so Aadhaar may not be totally exportable to any other neighboring country because sovereign considerations are also there, just like in any country. The parliamentary processes, the approval processes from their respective ministries, and what constitutions allows them to kind of undergo, and their own past journey of how they're being informed, their public being informed, their judiciary being informed, all equally very important consideration to kind of start thinking through. So each of the DPI layers either identity, the payment, or the data exchange has its own political economy. And then the use cases, for example, DPI for agriculture or DPI for public financial management or DPI for health, as we are undergoing this understanding. And diffusion is a painful process. Adoption is a painful process. It's a long ongoing journey. And we can't say that we have achieved or we have 100% saturated with whatever we have thought through, because something else would start, like the AI is appearing now, and how to kind of make those systems more efficient. So last but not the least, I would say, going back to the South-South principles, which India has been championing for almost 75 plus years since independence, is that it's not interference, but also respecting the mutual respect and offering the sovereignty in choice to the developing countries when they're coming to learn from India and when India is offering its expertise. Sir was there when South Africa did visit. I won't name not many institutions and not many countries, but many countries have reached out through G2G platforms and through other platforms. And those have been very powerful experiences, positive experiences for not many countries.
Okay, thank you so much for expanding the vision. We're actually at 1:15 now, so, and it's been a very, very long session. So I think what I would like to do is ask people who are online as well and around the room once, if there was one single recommendation from your, from your experience and perspective, what is it that you would like to see happen as a change, as a positive change? So could I begin with Dr. Shukla?
Well, I mean, in terms of change, I think the problem is that we have already created a very centralized identity system, and ideally it should have been decentralized, but right now I think it is too late. So we have to worry about how we can actually do better protection, use. I think somebody already mentioned that Aadhaar is now going for the W3C standard for verifiable credentials, which is a good thing. Using that, we can tokenize. We can use zero knowledge proofs for many of the identity activities. So I think that part, something we cannot undo the centralization, but we can actually do better protection. Better protection of the biometry, less use of biometry directly and use zero knowledge techniques and other privacy enhancing techniques in using of biometry for authentication, identification, etc. Can be done. So I think more research has to be done in this. There are techniques already available which should be integrated, and the UIDAI has to work more with academia and the research organizations on this. I think that is not very much happening. The technology innovation is not happening in the way it should have happened. In terms of privacy enhancing technology and so on. The other issue is that in terms of
just
many
one,
of these problems.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But we're going around the room, so just one for now.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks. Kunal, could we have your one recommendation?
Yeah, hi, sorry, thank you for that. I think the biggest thing that I would say is that we should acknowledge the fact that a lot of this has been solving from the administrative side. And that has been quite lovely. And I think maybe the shift now needs to become around citizen welfare and how do we define these terms and how do we figure out some part of this through the citizen experience or the user experience. I think that would be critical, and it encompasses a lot of the points that I think a lot of people have brought up here today. So I think that's my one big takeaway here.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Beni?
I was actually typing out my answer, but sure. I think just greater accountability at every level. This comes with legislative guarantees, with time-bound guarantees that when would the payment get in? When would the redress be resolved? Giving more voice to the citizen as a whole in the whole setup, I think there are many ways to get there. But for me, the key word I'm leaving at the table is greater accountability of the system to the citizen.
So back to the citizens. Yeah, thanks. Sunaina? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. To build on what the previous two panelists said, citizen-centric, of course, I think just the shift in data collection towards outcomes for beneficiaries and exclusions, and then we already know the solutions. Those exist. So let's visibilize the problem and put the citizen.
Okay, thank you. Nikita?
Yeah, I'll say two things. So just emphasizing on the data governance part. So standardization being critically important, so we can actually do the building once using multiple times, and just better recognition that of the political economy issue in a federated economy, which is a lot of this data is centralized, which again, privacy concerns, so data standards, but also greater demand for at least democratization of local use. So even ASHRM data, for example, is not there for states to look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Rajendran? Just go back.
Yeah. Just a couple of things. One is something I mentioned earlier, is to arrive at how to arrive at a good estimate of savings from DBT. I think have a wider workshop on coming up with a methodology for it, because the kind of things I talked about, that is people getting deleted because of unwilling to work, etc., might not be contributing to that. So that's one. And I'll build on that. Just two things. One is software systems, whenever they're introduced, they should follow the legal code. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen on many occasions. So we need to ensure there is a strong legal accountability framework for any kind of new digital system that's introduced. So moving that and go from KYC to KYR. We are thinking of citizens as customers. So they are citizens with rights. So can we think of a KYR, which is Know Your Rights framework, which needs to be displayed at every Panchayat Bhavan about what their rights with DBTs are and how to do grievance redressal in that.
Thanks. Srinivas?
You introduced identity in a society that's discriminatory by identity.
Yes.
Okay. So my solution to this is destroy identity, which is anonymity. It's been the foundation for the web. When you look at the anarchist frameworks, when you look at blockchain, when you look at cryptography as a mathematical science itself, right? So which are used in privacy preserving techniques. But as it happens, the Indian state won't give me anonymity. So I would push for pseudo-anonymity, which is virtual Aadhaar, which the UIDAI itself has rules about, but will never enforce it. So virtual Aadhaar.
Virtual is your preference. Okay, thank you. Sunil?
Yeah, I will say the other way around. Between IIDA, PFRDA, RBI, and SEBI, you can launch CKYC 2.0 using single Aadhaar. So this is one nation, one KYC. So this is what we should do, and that would solve a lot of problems and is possible today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Archita?
I think in terms of change, I interpreted your question a bit differently. But so I come from a tech background. The change that I would love to see is more of us building on top of the ecosystem and building on DPI, whether we are ethical hackers or we are building solutions. And I really like learning from some other organizations who are doing that. Because I think by building on top of DPI, we will be able to solve a lot of the challenges that we see. And I think in the room, there were so many points brought up about issues. And I think if we all take a lens, and I know we talk about the scary things about AI, but one thing that excites me as a product builder about AI, suddenly we can all, it has kind of democratized the ability to build, right? We can all actually think about solutions and build them. And I think when we have a vibrant ecosystem on top of DPI, we'll together be able to find a lot of solutions and actually be able to move the story forward.
That's great. So you're talking about more collaboration, something similar to what Dr. Shukla was saying. Shridharji?
Sorry, I missed. It's about concluding remarks. Okay.
Yes, the one change that
Yeah.
you would like to
Okay.
introduce.
I think the users, the common person, has to be far more enabled in terms of ability to comprehend what is happening. And I think a lot more effort with technology has to be made there, and balance it with the human operator who is more accountable. I would say it's a combination that empathy has to be there in the system, which has been brought up. I feel that should be the goal for inclusion, especially. Efficiency and security will follow. They are corollaries.
Right. Okay, thank you. Arijit?
Three things. Number one, during our
It's on.
Yeah. So three things, considering the level of stakeholders involved in DBT scheme, since this meeting is about. First, more, adoption of biometric, which still is yet to be, achieved on a satisfiable scale, because currently demographic OTP are still being preferred, and especially adoption of face authentication. Second, the error code, what we have learned, though it is very minuscule, UIDI does analyze. What we have found is it's from the requesting entity or the AUA, KUA who perform. So regular trainings need to be done. Third, from the parent department who is disbursing the scheme, because when this department onboard as requesting entities in UIDI ecosystem, they publish a gazette notification stating their authorization, where we have given a provision that not mandatory, periodic biometric update camps can be arranged for geriatric population and other people, which UIDI time to time recommends that every 10 years or one who has attained the age of 15 after birth shall do it. These are the critical things which often gets underlooked. So if these things can be implemented, the efficiency rate would be improved.
Okay, great. Thanks. Pranay?
I would say the future vision is the continued collaboration between public and private actors from India with the counterparts in other LMICs, and continued responsiveness as and when those demands are being requested, and also not only sharing knowledges but also with the technical assistance and all the offerings which we could provide from India side because of our own experiences and journey, and which not many champions from the public and private sector are already doing. So continue those collaborations.
Thank you. Shorey, sir?
Well, I think I'm going to also echo Anpan Shukla. I know well. I think there's a dire need to strengthen the research ecosystem. Really, I mean, particularly in the DPI, as the context of DPI. And the way to do that is to just involve diverse stakeholders. We have amazing startups in India. Many of them are, our own students who are doing so well, millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in the startup in cybersecurity. Right, so that's the first point. Just strengthen the research ecosystem. This also be futuristic. Look, in whatever we do now, in whatever we develop, we got to see the future. Quantum. When are we talking about quantum crypto? I mean, if we don't incorporate quantum now, 10 years from now, this will all be done, be obsolete. So let's now propose futuristic solutions. But again, it brings back to my first point, strengthen the research ecosystem in this sector.
Space. Thank you. Nish, would you like to say something?
Sure, and I apologize for missing a bulk of the conversation, but quickly to say, a huge privilege to be a fly on the wall here. I think it's rare for foreign governments to get insights into what a rich debate exists around these issues. And I suppose that's exactly what I would want to contribute, is that when India speaks to governments like Australia's about DPI, often the narrative is very much one of export, one of showcasing, which is important. But I think that does a disservice to the incredible ecosystem that exists under DPI. And so being able to share some of that nuance, I think, would be really valuable.
Thanks so much. So your views, you've patiently heard everybody coming up.
Thank you. I go back today in rest by the various stakeholders, and we had a very rich variety. The perfect is often the enemy of the practical or possible. So this is one dictum that I have while I perform my duties as a civil servant. So what may be perfect is often unreachable. And on the one end of the spectrum, we found that it is one of the global best practices recognized by multilateral international organizations, IMF, World Bank. I believe Bill and Gates Foundation is another one very important stakeholder which has been organizing it. South-South cooperation, we have a lot of interactions where Indian DPI, Indian DBT, Aadhaar, UPI, everything is very well appreciated. On the other hand, we have genuine pain points. And in a large country like ours, one of the biggest populations, we are a democracy, and democracy has its own pluses and minuses. So I would not like to elaborate, you would understand. A federal structure, many of you talked about federated systems. Set me thinking, could we have a federated identity, like Gujarat would issue its own identity, Maharashtra would issue its own, Meghalaya would issue its own, maybe. But what I would request all of you is that please look at the problem holistically. And when I say this, there are two things which come to my mind, which one is a perpetual problem of public policy, public administration, corruption. Perhaps DBT started because of the huge leakages that were taking place. The other is a more recent one, the concept of a welfare state. In the history of mankind, maybe 100 years, it is not more than 100 years old in terms of political philosophy and political economy. Then we have the digital pluses, and then the issues of cyber security, which are now coming up. So when we put everything together, it's a very, very complex subject. And we also need to look where we were pre-DBT or pre-DPI, where we are today. We also need to look, do we have better models? And although there were some stray references in whatever was discussed today, deliberated today, but there are hardly any models which come to my mind, and I will be very happy if that comes. But that has to be holistic. If you look at the elephant, someone is just looking at the tail, or someone is just looking at the trunk, or someone is just looking at the ear. Holistically, do we have a better system? I don't say Aadhaar is perfect, or DBT is perfect, or Indian DPI is perfect. No, there are a lot of shortcomings. But do we have a better solution, and do we have, more importantly, a better holistic solution? Something might be helping the cyber security aspect, but it would be increasing the ease of living burden. Something might be helping a ease of living burden, but it might be leading to corruption. So when we look at it holistically, then only we'll get a hang of things. So my request to all of you is that if you look at things holistically, from the DPI and DBT perspective, from the global best practices, and then you come up with a solution. Because any system you give me, I'll tell you 100 problems in this, in any system. But do we have a solution which takes it to a higher level, not the next generation? That is what I'm looking forward to, and will request to continue this engagement, because when we learn about someone who is looking at the tail or ear or head or trunk, we understand from a very different perspective. But yes, citizen centricity is one thing that I take, and which we already try to practice, because After all, whether it is DPI, whether it is Aadhaar, whether it is DBT, it is not made for a bureaucrat like me or an academician like you or a social worker like you or someone, whatever role we are here. It is made for the citizen. So how can we make the life of the citizen easy? But there's again a trade-off there, because if you try to make it too easy, it might lead to corruption. Now, corruption ultimately would make the life difficult because you won't have any money to spend. All the money would be siphoned off. So we have to look at a holistic level and try to come to a best outcome. I think that is how I look at it.
Thank you so much. So it's really been interesting for me to hear so many different, sides of the things. If you feel any lens or perspective has been missed during these discussions, please let us know. And all of us are here during the lunch as well. And we'll, of course, keep the conversation going, not just for this session for today, but because this is frankly for perpetuity. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, first of all, to Sumita, without whom this conversation wouldn't have been possible. Not a formal vote of thanks, but what I see here, and coming from the government, I respect what Saurabh ji has said. It is about two T's, tensions and trade-offs. And we do recognize that a large system such as this would have tensions which are embedded in it. So we, for instance, a tension between reducing leakages and avoiding exclusions, between standardization for scale and flexibility for diverse user realities, and between enabling innovation and preserving accountability and user protection. But importantly, these tensions should not be viewed as a reason for a retreat from DBT. And that's why when Saurabh Tiwari said that it's the ear, the tail, etc., the holistic picture, the policymaker is struggling to put all these pieces together in order to reconcile the tensions, in order to, after understanding the trade-offs. And so therefore, when we as social scientists, as economists are doing research, we should also be mindful of these trade-offs rather than giving black and white solutions. So DBT is not a static system, and DPI is not a static system. Nikita has worked a lot on UPIs. We are looking at UPI very closely. It is a dynamic system. And so therefore, it is a continuously evolving infrastructure shaped by regulatory reforms, institutional learning, implementation feedbacks, and these kind of sessions and conversations are very, very important for implementation feedbacks and technological adaptation with AI and machine learning. So we have already seen this through evolution of Aadhaar or of DBT system from the time it began. And there are new authentication alternatives, stronger privacy and cybersecurity safeguards. We know we have to do a lot, but that does not mean, again, having a very black and white view about the system as a whole. So just on the topic of inclusion, efficiency, and security, again, there are certain trade-offs pointed out by Mr. Tiwari. But on inclusion, I would again see what is the probability of error of exclusion. So is it 98.2 or is it 40.60? If it is 95.5 or 90.10, I think we are still good. And so therefore inclusion should be seen from a statistical view lens, that what is the exclusion error. Efficiency, there is a consensus, but what came out from this discussion was not only the efficiency for the government in the form of fiscal space it is creating and the fiscal savings, but also the outcomes. As Sunena had mentioned, that we should look at efficiency for the citizens and the outcomes. How does it translate into better outcomes? One issue on methodology, because as economists, and Shekhar is not here, he would love to see the numbers and the methodology of how these fiscal savings have been calculating, but it does not take away that there would have been massive savings on account of the system which has been put in place. Security, we had lots of interventions and good interventions and non-negotiable, totally non-negotiable. It cannot be compromised. And as mentioned, government is cognizant of that. But I do like your solution because of our other work which we are doing in startups. A lot of research needs to be, so it's outside the DBT space. It is generally that a lot of research needs to be funded in this area, and our startups and our entrepreneurial spirits of our startups will help us in doing that. The ANRF is in place. So hopefully that kind of funding with 1 lakh crores, we do think about cybersecurity much more seriously, and our deep tech startups help us with that. So just these few points. At one point, which this is very, I could be totally wrong, because when DBT is discussed and when data security is discussed, we try to pitch governments versus the private sector as if governments are the bad actors when it comes to having a privy into your data. Having worked very closely on what data extractivism means in the private sector, I think I see the same set of people not worried about that. So it always just comes to my mind. And given the fact now with the changing geopolitics and geoeconomics, where the private and the state are in fusion, say that was true in China, but it is also now getting more and more true in the US. I think we should be, in general, be worried about, because that was a point I think made by Beni, just be generally worried about and concerned about data flows and data extractivism. And sorry to say that government is sitting here, but I was told we should be more worried about private sector data extractivism, because government's lack of capacity will also help us in that extension, that they won't be able to do much with that data. And finally, on the word public, I'll end with what you said. Public is a complex word, and how does it entail both the government, the community, the private sector actors in making the system better is what we should look at. And I am absolutely with you that we need local solutions for defining these systems, and we can't be based on, because we are getting into AI and ML, on California-centric LLMs. We need to have our language models to define our digital public infrastructures. And I will be amiss if I don't thank my team, the digital economy startup and innovation team at ICRIER. The work was led by Nikita Jain and Mehak Agarwal and Krishnapriya and Shiva. Thank you so much. It wouldn't have been possible without all of you. Thanks to Australia-India Cyber and Critical Technology Partnership, it made us think harder, because the first question, which I was attending reception, the Australian High Commission to India basically said, tell us what needs to be done if I take it to small Pacific countries, and what we need to be mindful about. And so we'll bring in that hopefully in our report. And so therefore, thanks to Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and University of Queensland. And last but not least, thanks to Gates Foundation, because as I had mentioned, our work at ICRIER wouldn't have been possible in DPIs, and we wouldn't have been able to expand our intellectual foundation, so to speak, or Aadhaar, so to speak, in DPIs without the generous grant. Thanks to Shekhar, thanks to Mr. Tiwari. This is wonderful, because this never happens when the government actually sits through and through the whole session, which was so tiring, and listens. Listening. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Rajeev. Thanks, Rajesh Bansal. Thanks to Sumita and our team here who supports us in organizing these events, led by Neha Arora, Rajkumar, and Rajesh Chaudhary. Thank you so much. Yeah, lunch.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.